Chapter 867, The World Between the Serpent's Den and Life and Death. In the Great Hall of Riddle House, Snape gradually broke free from his memories, his wand clenched in his hand as he prepared to complete the final task Dumbledore had assigned him: kill Nagini the serpent.
What a shame.
Snape sighed. With the right setup, he would have been able to get rid of Lord Voldemort with the help of Ivan Hals. However, he was very worried that something unexpected would happen, so he did not dare to involve the other party. Now, he could only watch as this opportunity passed. Sighing to himself, Snape quickly composed himself. He could not afford to push his luck. At the heart of this plan was the removal of Harry's identity as a Horcrux, followed by ensuring the safety of both of them. Too much risk-taking would only increase the likelihood of his exposure.
It's time to act.
Snape glanced at Harry, who was lying unconscious on the floor. After a moment's thought, he cast a disillusionment charm on Harry, took a deep breath, and used his magic to drag Harry down to the basement of the Riddle House. Ever since the attack on Gringotts over a month ago, Voldemort had been hiding Nagini, although the exact location was unknown to even him. After all, Voldemort did not have enough trustworthy people to create a second safe house, and Harry had the ability to sense the snake, so even if Voldemort placed Nagini in the mountains, he would be caught by Ivan Hals. As for why Harry had to be brought along. Naturally, since Voldemort could return at any time, he would not have the time to move Harry to a safe place and return for the mission. Instead, he might as well take the unconscious Harry with him. It would be easier for him to escape then. As Voldemort's
Most loyal
subordinate, Snape was well aware of the deep connection between Nagini and Voldemort. Snape guessed that Voldemort would sense his attack, so he had to move fast, kill Nagini and retreat within minutes. As he tried to come up with a plan, Snape made his way deeper into the house. He could hear a strange hissing sound coming from underground, and with a jolt he realized that he had been right. Nagini was still in the house. However, as they drew closer, Snape realized that something was wrong. The low hissing was becoming loud and noisy, and the stone tiles on the ground were slippery with slime. Tens of thousands of snakes of different sizes were crammed into a room that was hundreds of square feet wide. As far as the eye could see, the snakes were coiling around each other.
You can't help it, Harry.
A gentle, familiar voice came from behind him, and Harry turned in surprise to see Dumbledore, wearing a dark blue robe, walking towards him. Harry instantly forgot everything else and began to speak anxiously.
Professor Snape.
Dumbledore reassured him, adding,
In fact, I'm curious about what happened to the wizarding community in my absence.
Harry's excitement subsided a little, and he began to recount what had happened after Dumbledore's death, with emphasis on the fact that Snape had betrayed Harry's trust in Voldemort. Dumbledore listened without comment, and when Harry finished, he said apologetically,
I hope you will understand his actions, Harry. What?
Harry was taken aback.
Because Severus did as I instructed.
Dumbledore said, raising his eyebrows in mock praise.
I must say he did well, at least better than I expected.
Chapter 868, The Border Between Life and Death. Harry froze at Dumbledore's words, his green eyes bulging behind his spectacles and a chill running down his spine.
You mean?
Harry stumbled back, stammering in anger and fear.
No one would want you to die, Harry.
Dumbledore assured him.
In fact, all of the planning is to avoid this as much as possible. But I'm dead now, aren't I?
Harry scowled at Dumbledore, who winked at him and said briskly,
That may not be true.
Harry is so confused that he can't quite understand what Dumbledore is saying, but he does remember being hit by Voldemort's killing curse and being unable to fight back because of his wand.
As I recall, I should have explained why Lord Voldemort could not harm you,
said Dumbledore, smiling.
It's the protection charm.
This thought occurred to Harry at once, but his confusion did not lessen. He knew that the protection charm should have worn off by the time Lord Voldemort returned last year. In an attempt to confirm this, Lord Voldemort tried to touch him and was not harmed. Harry looked at Dumbledore in surprise, awaiting his reply.
How shall I put it to you? Voldemort was clever enough to add your blood to his resurrection, thinking that it would break the spell. But he did not know that by doing so he had strengthened the protective spell and deepened the bond between you.
Dumbledore said briskly.
Then why did you ask Snape to give me to Voldemort?
Harry was still confused and kept asking questions. Dumbledore was silent for a long time, trying to decide how to respond. Harry did not rush him but waited, and after what seemed like an eternity, Dumbledore finally came to his senses.
Is it any wonder you were able to get inside Voldemort's head?
Dumbledore asked slowly, and then, as Harry was thinking about it, he pointed to a child with dark red skin and a wrinkled face. Looking at him, what did you think of?
He's a bit like…
Harry studied him for a moment, remembering the baby-like Dark Lord he had seen last year.
It's part of Voldemort's soul.
Dumbledore said bluntly, looking at Harry. Shortly after you were born, on the night that Lord Voldemort intended to kill you, the protective charm repelled the killing curse he had cast upon you, injuring his soul and causing some of it to detach from his primary soul and attach itself to the only living person in the room.
His Horcrux attached itself to me.
Harry's brain seemed to have short-circuited. He could not believe it, but reason told him that Dumbledore was right, and only then could he explain his connection to Voldemort.
It was, to be precise, but now your soul is whole, Harry, and he is all your own.
Dumbledore exclaimed happily.
Voldemort couldn't kill me, so the killing curse was cast on that part of my soul.
Harry guessed.
Yes.
Dumbledore nodded.
And am I still alive?
Harry asked quickly.
Of course.
Dumbledore confirmed. However, if you have no memories of that world, you may move on.
I think he was willing to shelter you partly out of love for your mother, and partly out of guilt.
Dumbledore spoke with great emotion. He could understand Snape's feelings of guilt. After all, he had committed some misdeeds in his early years and ignored the deaths of too many people, which was one of the reasons he was willing to trust Snape. Harry was silent for a long time, his feelings complicated. By rights, he should hate Snape so much that he might be able to snuggle up to his parents and enjoy a good childhood without their snitch. However, considering that Snape had risked everything to lurk around Voldemort all these years, and had gone to great lengths to keep him alive, even daring to plot against him, Harry's hatred towards him abated. Also, the deaths of James and Lily were not solely Snape's fault, as Voldemort's reign of terror was at the root of everything, and as members of the Order of the Phoenix, they were in constant danger. And then there was Pettigrew Peter, without whom Voldemort would never have found the safe house.
I'm sorry I have to keep this from you, Harry.
Dumbledore apologized.
You were right, Professor.
Harry shook his head. If he was Voldemort's Horcrux, then there was a good chance that Voldemort would know everything he knew. If word got out, Snape would be in danger as a double agent.
It seems you'll have to go back soon, Harry. Severus is in some trouble and I'm afraid he needs your help.
Chapter 869, Dumbledore, I'm waiting for someone.
What happened? Did Voldemort try to kill Professor Snape?
Harry asked. He had been mysteriously brought to Lord Voldemort by Snape and died under the Dark Lord's killing curse after only a few words.
I can't see anything more specific, but I think it has something to do with Horcruxes.
Dumbledore paused, then proceeded to explain how he had instructed Snape to kill Nagini the serpent.
What am I supposed to do? Destroy the Horcrux and cast the fire-scorching charm on it? I never learned that spell.
Harry seemed at a loss. He had been told by Ivan, Sirius, and the others how difficult Horcruxes were to deal with.
No, using dark magic against dark magic is not a wise move.
Dumbledore shook his head, then smiled and asked.
Remember how your mother fought the killing curse? With…
Harry said uncertainly.
Or the power of belief.
Dumbledore said slowly.
To protect you from your own doom, Lily sacrificed herself in a burst of courage that was beyond description, and with an ancient magic, she transfigured this supremely strong belief into power and hid it within you.
If necessary, you may attempt to use similar powers against Horcruxes.
Dumbledore added.
I'm afraid I can't do that, sir.
Harry's face was flushed, and he was unable to stop himself from retorting, as he did not even have a wand in his hand, let alone a powerful charm that could turn belief into power. He couldn't possibly expect Nagini to explode if he tried to kill her, could he? This is ridiculous.
I'm sure you can do it if you want to and are determined enough.
Dumbledore said mysteriously, then urged Harry on before he could reply.
Well, you should go back now, Harry, back the way you came.
The scene around them shook violently, and countless cracks appeared in the towering hall, as if it were about to collapse. Harry ignored the questions filling his mind and shouted.
What about you, Professor Dumbledore? Aren't you coming back with me? We are different. You are alive and there is hope, but I am dead and on a different path to a new and unknown adventure.
Dumbledore smiled. Harry wanted to say something but stopped himself. If going forward was the way to the world of the dead and going back meant returning to the land of the living, then did that mean that Dumbledore, who was stuck there, was in a life-or-death situation and had no choice?
I am here because there is someone else I must wait for.
Dumbledore was becoming transparent, as if he were shrouded in a white mist, but his voice reached Harry's ears.
If he is willing to keep his promise, he will be here soon.
Wait for someone.
Professor, look out up there.
Snape reacted instantly, raising his head and swinging his wand with all his might. Invisible blades of magic flew out and hit Nagini with a metallic clang. Nagini's cries of pain could be heard as her snake-like body, as thick as a child's waist, tumbled through the air and crashed to the ground. However, due to the uniqueness of the Horcrux, even after taking a direct hit from the Obscurus, there were no visible wounds on her massive body.
Use sharp fire.
Harry warned.
You think I don't know that? There's no way to use fire in here.
Chapter 870, Voldemort. This is impossible. Snape's loyalty to me is as hard as steel. Snape's attack did not work, but it did enrage Nagini. The 12-foot-long snake hissed and curled up, furiously biting at Snape. The terrible snake venom was eating away at Snape's body, making his head spin and his reflexes slow, forcing him to roll away from Nagini. Harry watched anxiously. He did not have a wand and could only look around for a suitable object to help him, but there was nothing in the enclosed basement except a few pieces of dusty furniture. On the other hand, Snape's condition was deteriorating, and he was feeling even more powerless as none of the spells he had cast had any effect on Nagini. Seeing that the situation was getting more and more dangerous, Harry did not hesitate to grab a chair and rush forward, intending to sneak up on Nagini from behind to deliver a critical hit. However, Nagini seemed to have eyes in the back of his head, and with a gentle flick of his tail, he shattered the chair that Harry had thrown at him. Annoyed with Harry's antics or simply wanting to pick on a pushover, Nagini abandoned Snape and slithered towards Harry, her long tail once again hooking around Harry's ankles, pulling him to the ground and biting him. Harry tried to move his body backwards, his right hand groping around for a stool leg or something to block the blow, and accidentally caught a heavy iron object. As Nagini's jaws closed on him, Harry instinctively swung the object in his hand. Ding! The sound of metal on stone was heard again, and Harry's right hand went numb and his thumb and index finger were in pain. He almost dropped the hilt of his sword, but Nagini did not have it easy either and was knocked back. Harry took a moment to glance at his right hand, and was surprised to find that he was holding an ornate sword engraved with goblin inscriptions. Apparently, it was the sword of Gryffindor.
Keep hitting it with your sword. I'll create an opportunity for you.
Harry hesitated, his sword in his hand, because if the slash didn't work on Nagini, the result would be the same no matter how many times he tried. However, before Harry could explain himself, Snape attacked, quickly shaking his wand and releasing a cloud of smoke from its tip, which transformed into a black chain that bound the snake tightly.
Quick, I can't hold on much longer.
Snape shouted at the dazed Harry. Harry's heart skipped a beat and he immediately cast his worries aside. He looked at the snake and charged at it. Nagini sensed the danger and tried to wiggle out of Snape's spell, but to no avail. His gaze locked with hers, and Harry felt a bone-deep chill run through him, as if he were looking into the eyes of Lord Voldemort himself, but this did not scare him. Instead, it made him rebel, and with a roar, he struck down.
Go to hell, monster!
The ornate sword began to glow with a faint fluorescent light, as if some inexplicable force were being infused into the blade through Harry's hands, and Nagini's almost invulnerable protection was no longer effective, as the sharp blade struck the snake's body and left a deep gash. Nagini let out a series of pained whinnies as her thrashing managed to break Snape's hold. Harry did not know where he got his courage from, but instead of retreating, he stepped on the snake and with the last of his strength stabbed it over its head. The silver sword pierced through the snake's head and pinned Nagini to the ground. The serpent used what remained of its strength to struggle wildly, and with a swing of its body, it sent Harry flying, but its final burst of life did not last long, and Nagini soon lay limp on the ground, his body slowly disintegrating into a pile of gray dust. It's finally over.
This is not a good time to be happy, Potter. Voldemort must have received the news, and we must return to Hogwarts as soon as possible.
Snape warned, frowning as he leaned against the wall. Completing the mission did not mean they would be safe. On the contrary, they were in grave danger, and an enraged Lord Voldemort could return at any moment and kill them. However, Snape was puzzled. They had been fighting Nagini for so long that Voldemort should have sensed them. Or was Voldemort not as connected to the serpent as he thought?
It's time to end this, Grindelwald.
Chapter 871, The Dark King Killed the Dark King. Since he would not be able to get out of this trouble anytime soon, Voldemort concentrated on dealing with Grindelwald, intending to get rid of him first. Grindelwald, however, took his time and did not intend to confront Voldemort head-on. Voldemort's face was contorted with rage. He could not believe that he, with the Deathly Hallows in his possession, could not hold back a dark wizard who had been imprisoned for decades and was half paralyzed. This caused Lord Voldemort to doubt his own strength once again, and he even vaguely recalled that night a year ago, when he confidently charged into Knockoff Alley only to be beaten back by a little ghost.
Get out of my way!
Voldemort shouted angrily, losing all interest in dealing with Grindelwald, as he could vaguely make out Harry Potter and his most loyal henchman, Snape.
This is impossible!
Voldemort muttered to himself. He could not believe that Snape would betray him. Snape had risked his life for him so many times, and he had even offered up such a powerful wand.
Confringo, exploding thunder.
Grindelwald took the opportunity to wave his wand, and the scattered blue flames gathered together, turning into a long tongue of fire that swept towards Voldemort. Voldemort's reaction was too slow, and he was forced to conjure a semicircle to protect himself. The blue tongue of fire quickly collided with the barrier, and the exploding flames instantly tore fine cracks in the barrier. Voldemort, on the other hand, had no time to recover. He only felt a splitting headache as if his brain had been struck by a sword. The pain that penetrated deep into his soul almost made him faint. In just a second, the dark blue flames exploded, and the shield that had been hastily built was instantly broken. Voldemort did not even have time to transform into the black mist before he was sent flying. Grindelwald summoned a gust of wind to disperse the smoke and dust. He approached Voldemort and bent down to pick up the Elder Wand.
You were right, it is indeed time to end this.
Grindelwald waved his wand vigorously, spitting out a few unintelligible words, and the remaining blue flames on Voldemort's robes began to swell. The terrible fire ate away at Voldemort's body, turning him into a torch, and a black soul burst from his ashes and flew away, shrieking. As long as his soul was alive, he still had hope. With this thought in mind, Voldemort threw away the 2 Deathly Hallows and his own body. But then a pair of green eyes appeared in his mind's eye, and the boy he was supposed to have killed stabbed Nagini in the head with a sword.
No!
Voldemort cried out in despair, unable to accept that his last Horcrux was about to be destroyed, and yet he could only watch as Harry swung his sword. With a piercing pain, everything seemed to leave him, and his barely unified soul collapsed. Ivan, who had just received the news from Winky, was stunned when he saw Voldemort's spirit rush out of the tower and disintegrate in midair.
Didn't you report that Mr. Grindelwald might be in danger, Winky?
Ivan asked grimly, turning to look at the burning tower as Grindelwald emerged from the rubble.
Winky.
The house elf's eyes widened in disbelief that Grindelwald had killed the powerful Dark Lord.
It seems that our new British savior has been born.
Chapter 872, The Wizarding World is Just Another Prison. Ivan slowly moved forward and blocked the entrance to Nurmengard. His gaze lingered on the elder wand in Grindelwald's hand for a moment before he questioned him.
So you're ready to break out, Grindelwald, or are you going to move to a more comfortable cell? A prison break.
Grindelwald's lips curled into a smile.
That's true, but I'm afraid I'm not the only one in a cage. The entire wizarding community is just another prison. It shows that the world is sick and deformed, and
Grindelwald said casually.
Correct.
Ivan's eyes narrowed.
A lion need not fear a flock of sheep, and muggles have ruled the world long enough, bringing only more violence and injustice, and allowing lesser men to take power and wealth.
Grindelwald replied in a low, hoarse voice.
And create new wars and injustices.
Ivan said mockingly, interrupting Grindelwald.
A wizard is no different from a muggle, except in the ability to use magic. And I'm afraid wizards miss none of the muggle mistakes.
Wizards were never as exceptional as Grindelwald claimed, nor were they a noble race, something that the Ministry of Magic, led by Fudge, could not have been more impressed with.
I see that failure 50 years ago did not teach you much about muggle rule.
Ivan sneered. Grindelwald ignored Ivan's sarcastic comment and said bluntly.
So I need more preparation and more help. That includes you, of course, Harls.
Grindelwald said earnestly to Ivan. Ivan was taken aback. He had not expected Grindelwald to try to win him over before the war.
You and I are both extraordinarily powerful wizards, and fighting each other will only weaken us, not to mention the fact that we both have similar ideas, don't you think? The inevitable conflict between wizards and muggles will break out one day, and rather than having a muggle at the helm, it would be better if you and I started it together.
Grindelwald said in a high-pitched voice, then reached out and looked at Ivan.
Come, hails for the future of the wizarding world, and for wizards to live openly in every corner of it. All fellow wizards must stick together and contribute.
Grindelwald's voice echoed through Newmengardry, and after a long silence, Yvonne said playfully.
If that's the case, why don't we do it the other way around? You'll work for me, and we can try all kinds of policies in the pre-British world, and then spread them across the wizarding community, in my own way, of course.
Grindelwald had made his point, so he had to give him a chance.
So you are prepared to refuse my offer?
Grindelwald's face darkened.
Then it seems we have nothing to discuss. I thought you'd understand from the start that we're never on the same page.
Ivan said casually. Their previous conversation on the top floor of the tower had shown him how dangerous Grindelwald's ideas were, and Ivan had never expected them to coexist peacefully. Their ill-concealed hostility caused the atmosphere to grow tense. Without warning, Ivan made the first move, sending white fireballs the size of human heads hurtling towards Grindelwald. With a gentle wave of his wand, a dark blue wall of fire appeared in front of him. The two strange flames collided, and a series of violent explosions sounded. The rolling air billow lifted Grindelwald's robe, and Winky the house elf ducked under a solid wall, only half her head visible as she watched the fight nervously. Ivan vanished in a flash of flame, reappearing behind Grindelwald and flicking his wand. A green beam of light shot from the tip of the wand. Grindelwald did not anticipate Ivan's ability to disapparate in Newmengard, but he was able to detect the subtle magical fluctuations in the space jump and narrowly avoid the fatal blow. Grindelwald was angered by his near-death experience with an underage brat, and his eyes flashed fiercely. He shook his wand with all his might, and the ghostly blue flames instantly transformed into a long whip that whipped toward Ivan. Ivan tried to conjure a round shield, but it was easily broken, so he had to disapparate again. Grindelwald's magic-enhanced wand gave him an advantage in both offense and defense, and his various charms were more than doubled in power. Ivan, however, was not worried. The power of a spell was never the deciding factor in a battle. After dodging a death curse by transforming into flames, the ethereal white mist gradually floated out of Ivan's wand and condensed into a unicorn. After not being able to show her face for a long time, Cecilia happily circled Ivan twice before stepping on the light mist and letting out arrogant neighs as she charged towards Grindelwald. Grindelwald struck out several spells, but they passed through the unicorn's shadow. Realizing how difficult this spell was, Grindelwald raised his blackened, nearly unconscious left hand and drew his wand across his palm. Black blood instantly splattered everywhere, but before it hit the ground, the black blood scattered like bullets under the guidance of magic. The illusory unicorn shadow was hit by the black blood bead and was not spared. Bloody holes were corroded all over its body. Ivan pointed his wand and pulled a stone tablet to his side, blocking the rest of the blood. He then looked at the half-crippled unicorn's shadow and frowned. Though he did not expect Cecilia to take care of Grindelwald, he did not expect her to wound the unicorn's shadow so easily. Grindelwald unexpectedly did not pursue the matter, but lowered his wand and said,
I hope you will give me another answer when we next meet.
Chapter 873, The Tiger Out of the Cage. Ivan had no intention of letting Grindelwald go.
Stay with me.
He shouted.
You don't know that.
Grindelwald said, his lips curling into a sinister smile as he pointed his elder wand at Ivan. Ivan instinctively waved his wand to create several magical barriers, but an ear-piercing explosion came from above him. Shadows filled the square. Ivan looked up in surprise, and then his pupils constricted as the already crumbling tower above him tilted and fell. Grindelwald's wild laughter was heard as countless heavy bricks and stones buried the two. Winky, who was watching from a short distance away, seemed very anxious. When the tower collapsed, she rushed forward to try and dig Ivan out. Before it could start, Ivan's voice came from behind him.
No need to dig, I'm here.
Winky turned her head in surprise as a large white flame gathered and Ivan appeared out of it.
Sir, what do we do now?
Winky asked in a high-pitched voice, as if she had just found her master. Ivan did not reply. He looked at the ruins with a grave expression. Considering that Grindelwald might still be here, Ivan waved his wand and burned the rocks with a fierce fire. The fire burned for an hour, and Ivan was unable to find Grindelwald anywhere in Newmengard.
Could it be the cloak of invisibility?
Ivan asked, rubbing his chin as he recalled the message Harry had sent him earlier. However, this discovery was undoubtedly bad news. Such a powerful wizard was wearing the cloak of invisibility, and his chances of finding him were almost nil.
Come on, let's get back to Hogwarts.
Ivan said, looking around at the burned and empty grounds of Newmengard. He had no choice but to give up on his search for Grindelwald and return to the castle as soon as possible, in case his home was stolen, and he had too many questions that he desperately needed answers to.
How dare you?
Hermione demanded, glaring at Ron.
You let Harry.
I don't think so, do you?
Ron said sheepishly, but he was worried. He'd wanted to contact Ivan, but he wasn't even at Hogwarts, and there was no reply from him through the mark. Hermione slammed her right hand on the table and stood up.
What are you going to do, Hermione?
Ron asked, startled by her outburst.
I'm going to tell Professor McGonagall about this.
Hermione hissed.
Wait!
Ron thought for a moment, then stood up as well, knowing that he would be scolded if he told the professor, but considering Harry's safety, he didn't care. Just as they were about to move, Peeves flew in and shouted.
The Dark Lord!
Peeves's scream brought an eerie silence to the noisy Great Hall. Then, as if the play button had been reactivated, the students screamed and tried to escape as fast as they could. Several students were knocked to the ground and had to crawl under the tables.
Peeves, what are you shouting about?
Peeves's eyes rolled as he tried to make the situation sound tragic, but before he could speak, Harry stumbled into the hall, supporting Snape. Professor McGonagall had a bad feeling when she saw the two of them covered in dirt. She hurried over and asked,
Oh my God, Severus Potter, what happened to you?
Flitwick and the others gathered around, demanding to know what was going on and whether, as Peeves claimed, the Dark Lord had broken in.
Get out of the way.
Madame Pomfrey forced her way in and gave Harry and Snape a preliminary examination. Harry was in relatively good condition, and although he was suffering from a lot of abrasions, they were minor problems that could be dealt with a good night's sleep. Snape, on the other hand, was in a worse state, his face ghastly pale and his entire right leg turning purple. Madame Pomfrey immediately suggested that they move Snape to the hospital wing for further treatment.
I've dealt with the snake venom, and it won't kill me anytime soon. I have more important things to report.
Snape refused Madame Pomfrey's offer of help and looked around anxiously.
Where's Ivan Howells? Where's Hars? I need to see him.
Ivan doesn't seem to be at school, and we can't reach him for a while.
Hermione said helplessly as she and Ron pushed their way through the chaotic crowd. Snape's expression turned sour.
So what happened, Severus? Did you have to contact Hollis?
Professor McGonagall asked, immediately realizing the gravity of the situation.
We have destroyed something very important to the Dark Lord, and he will most likely choose to attack Hogwarts.
Chapter 874, The Battle in the Great Hall. McGonagall and the others looked at each other, their faces grave, but before they could ask further questions, another voice came from the hall.
No, he won't, because Voldemort is dead. Who is it?
Professor McGonagall turned around, startled, and saw a figure standing in the entrance hall. Flitwick and the others immediately went on guard, as they realized that the wand in the other's hand was the wand that the late headmaster Albus Dumbledore used. Grindelwald strolled into the great hall, his sickly pallor and unusually thin frame putting a great deal of pressure on the assembly. Professor McGonagall stepped in front of Grindelwald and said sternly,
Halt, please state your purpose in coming here, wizard. And may I ask why you have Albus's wand?
I am only here to find one person.
Grindelwald replied flatly, his eyes sweeping over the faces of the assembled group before settling on Harry, who was wearing spectacles and covered in dirt. Snape caught Grindelwald's gaze and quickly warned him.
His target is Potter. Get him out of here.
Madame Pomfrey, who was closest to Harry, immediately reacted, pulling him behind her and urging the other students to take refuge, while McGonagall and Flitwick attacked Grindelwald.
Excellarmus, excluding your weapon.
Petrificus, all petrified.
Stupefy, stupefy. Come on, I'm here.
Grindelwald did as he was told and turned his head away from the shivering junior wizards. Having caught Grindelwald's attention, Harry ran towards the back door without looking back, trying to lure Grindelwald out of the great hall and prevent further casualties. However, before he could get far, the door ahead of him swung shut and locked itself, rendering his opening charm useless. Harry had no choice but to turn around and wave his wand at Grindelwald, who was approaching.
Expelliarmus, remove your weapon.
A scarlet beam of light shot from the tip of the wand, aiming straight at Grindelwald. Unfortunately, this proved to be futile, as the latter gently waved his wand, and Harry's disarming charm bounced off and hit him. Harry tumbled to the ground, his wand in his hand. Grindelwald's face broke into a smile when he sensed that the elder wand in his hand was no longer resisting his will, but he kept the tip of his wand pointed at Harry just in case. Fortunately, the back door of the Great Hall was forced open by several spells. Dawlish led a large group of Aurors to protect Harry, and Hermione and Ron were the first to drag him away. Instead of taking refuge with the other students, they summoned the Aurors stationed near Hogwarts. Grindelwald's expression did not change. A dozen Aurors seemed insignificant to him, but soon another voice spoke behind him.
Stonegates move out.
Chapter 875, The Death of Voldemort. When Ivan returned to Hogwarts, he was greeted by the sight of a large crowd of Aurors surrounding the castle. Several professors and Ministry of Magic officials gathered in front of the Great Hall to discuss something, even the acting minister, Pierce.
Sir Harles, you're finally back.
Dawlish, who was guarding the entrance to the hall, was relieved to see Ivan and hurried over.
Tell me what happened.
Yvonne asked, although she already had an idea. Dawlish did not try to hide anything from them and told them everything that had happened during the attack, although he did slightly alter the ending to make it seem as if Grindelwald had retreated voluntarily and been beaten off by the Aurors. Having personally experienced Grindelwald's prowess, Ivan was well aware of the slight exaggeration in Dawlish's words, but he chose not to point it out. Instead, he went on to ask about the most important casualties as his friends were still at Hogwarts.
The 4 professors sustained minor injuries while fighting off the attackers, frightening most of the students, but fortunately, no one was killed.
Dawlish reported, revealing that Snape had been treated for snake venom and that Harry Potter was being hunted by the attackers. Ivan was relieved to hear that the students were only mildly frightened. Even though he had guessed Grindelwald would try to steal something, he did not expect him to move so quickly. Continuous, high-intensity combat would only worsen the effects of dark magic on the body, and given Grindelwald's condition, he would almost certainly lose his life in battle again. Furthermore, if he returned to Hogwarts in the middle of the war, Grindelwald would most likely die there. Apparently aware of this, however, the attacker acted decisively and without hesitation. After defeating Harry and regaining control of the Elder Wand, they immediately retreated. As for the fact that there were no casualties, Ivan was somewhat surprised, but on second thought, he guessed that Grindelwald had held back. After all, Hogwarts was home to hundreds of young wizards and witches, as well as hundreds of wizarding families, and Grindelwald prided himself on being the savior of the wizarding world.
Do you know who the attacker was, Sir Harles?
Dawlish asked curiously when Ivan seemed lost in thought.
The attacker was Gellert Grindelwald.
Ivan said.
Grindelwald?
Dawlish muttered, frowning. He had a vague feeling he had heard the name before, but he could not place it.
Grindelwald, the Dark Lord who terrorized Europe decades ago.
Professor McGonagall exclaimed as she led the professors to join them.
Are you absolutely sure it's him, Harles? As far as I know, Grindelwald was defeated by Albus over 50 years ago and should be in custody in Newmengard.
You're right, but the problem is that now that Headmaster Dumbledore is gone, a prison alone is not going to hold him.
Ivan said with a shrug. McGonagall, Flitwick, and the others looked at each other with a chill in their hearts. Unlike the younger generation of wizards like Dawlish, many of them had lived through that era and knew exactly what Grindelwald's escape meant, the man who had single-handedly thrown Europe into chaos. Pierce was having a headache. Britain was in enough trouble as it was, with the Grindelwald before their own Dark Lord, Voldemort, could be dealt with.
By the way, I almost forgot to mention that Voldemort is dead. What? You know who's dead?
Pierce, Dawlish, and the others froze, wondering if they had misheard. As if suddenly remembering something, the professors asked.
Grindelwald told us this before. Is it true?
Ivan nodded.
I saw Lord Voldemort die in Newmengard.
Could Grindelwald have killed him? When he heard that Lord Voldemort had died in Newmengard, McGonagall immediately guessed that Grindelwald might have been responsible, and that Grindelwald had the power to do so. However, none of them were happy about it. In their eyes, Lord Voldemort was a monster that was too powerful to be defeated, and Grindelwald was able to kill him.
Don't worry, Grindelwald might not be as good as Voldemort. Harry and Snape were the main reason why he won so well.
Ivan half-joked, half-jokingly. McGonagall and the others had been briefed by the two of them before, so they were not surprised by this news. They quickly confirmed it with each other and believed it.
So are we going to report this? And what about you-know-whose death? Can't say Grindelwald did it, can we?
Pierce asked worriedly. Grindelwald would not be able to hide the fact that he had caused such chaos in the castle. He had even predicted that his desk would be covered in howler letters from his parents tomorrow. The only good thing was that none of the students died, or he would have been in a worse position.
Killing Voldemort was the work of Harry Potter, Professor Snape, and the Ministry of Magic.
Ivan said, setting the tone. Now that Grindelwald had said he didn't want the credit, Ivan wasn't going to hold back.
As for his attack on Hogwarts,
said Ivan after a moment's thought.
Put Grissom in the papers and inform the International Confederation of Wizards that Grindelwald's escape is not just a British matter, nor is Nurmengard our concern. Let these people suffer for a while.
Chapter 876. Ivan, this is just a small suggestion. Ivan went on and on about the Ministry's next task, and how Pierce should send more men to capture the remaining Death Eaters according to the list Snape had given him. Did I say something wrong? Ivan was confused at first, but he quickly recovered and said,
Of course, it's just a little advice. It's up to Minister Pierce to decide what to do.
Pierce nodded eagerly, agreeing that the Ministry of Magic would never be so dictatorial as the former Fudge government, and would seriously consider every useful suggestion. Their stilted attempt at subterfuge did not work, however, and the professors could not help but feel that the acting minister was being too kind to Ivan. No.
By the way, where are Harry and Professor Snape? How are their injuries? I have some important information that I need to confirm with them.
Ivan was reluctant to explain further about the ministry, so he changed the subject.
They're being treated at the hospital wing. They'll probably be awake by now.
Professor McGonagall said hesitantly.
You guys go ahead, I'll go check on Harry.
Ivan said casually, then turned and headed back to the hospital wing. The smell of the potion quickly reached Ivan's nostrils as he pushed open the closed doors, and his gaze swept over the beds of injured students. Though not because of the exploding charm Grindelwald had cast on the Great Hall, as many of the young wizards had been accidentally trampled by the crowd as they fled. Madame Pomfrey was standing in front of Harry's room with a bowl of dark potion in her hand. Harry looked miserable, but he accepted the bitter potion and gulped it down. Madame Pomfrey had been badly injured in the attempt to save him, and was now caring for them with her own injuries, so Harry did not want to put Madame Pomfrey on the spot. Snape's bed was next to Harry's, presumably because they were sent to the hospital together, but he was apparently not too happy about it and insisted that Pomfrey change his bed.
I need to remind you, Severus, that every bed in this room is taken. And since your leg is injured, if you don't want to become a cripple in the future, you will stay in this bed for the next few days.
Pomfrey's face was stern as he scolded Snape, scaring him into silence. When Ivan opened the door and came in, Pomfrey turned around and asked with concern.
What are you doing here, Harles? Are you hurt too?
No, I'm fine, ma'am.
Yvonne shook her head and took a few steps closer, looking at the couple in the hospital bed.
Could you give me a moment with Harry and Professor Snape? That will not do.
Pomfrey was adamant when it came to matters of the wounded.
Save your questions for tomorrow. They are in dire need of rest.
I'll only be delayed for a short while. I'll leave when I'm done. This is a very important matter. Minister Pierce asked me to come, and it may concern the safety of Hogwarts and the entire wizarding community.
Ivan said seriously, not joking at all. Even though Yvonne made it sound so serious, Madame Pomfrey reluctantly agreed after much consideration.
I'll give you 5 minutes tops.
Madame Pomfrey checked her watch, and when Ivan nodded in agreement, she grabbed her empty bowl and went off to tend to the other patients. Harry looked apprehensively at Ivan, and Snape looked grave, both of them worried that they might hear bad news from Ivan. However, after Madame Pomfrey left, Ivan's grave expression suddenly relaxed, and he reached out to pat Harry on the shoulder, saying with a smile,
Congratulations on killing Voldemort, Harry.
What? I killed Lord Voldemort.
Harry was shocked by the news, remembering that he had only destroyed the snake. Snape was not surprised. When he first saw Grindelwald holding the Elder Wand, he had his suspicions, but he could not confirm them.
Can you be sure of that, Harles?
Snape asked. Ivan nodded. Lord Voldemort had been badly beaten by Grindelwald, and his soul had been ripped from his body and scattered in the air. Not even Merlin's resurrection could bring him back. With Ivan's confirmation, Snape looked as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. His eyes lit up with relief, and he leaned against the headboard with the air of a sage who had nothing more to ask for.
Wait, what's going on?
Harry asked, still confused as to why he had claimed to have killed Lord Voldemort.
When you and Professor Snape killed Nagini, Voldemort was badly injured and lost his duel with Grindelwald.
Chapter 877, Ivan, Impossible Am I a Fake Gryffindor? Ivan reached over and picked up the sword of Gryffindor, which was lying next to his bed. The ornate sword looked the same as ever, but Ivan had the distinct feeling that the magical power within it had been enhanced. The original Gryffindor sword did not have the ability to destroy Horcruxes, as evidenced by Harry's failure to break through Nagini's defenses when he first attacked her. However, its greatest advantage was that it could absorb all beneficial elements to strengthen itself. Now, it seemed that this beneficial element was extremely wide-ranging. In addition to the basic substance, it also included the power of the mind and will. As a master alchemist, Ivan was no stranger to this emotional energy, as he had used it to repair his crescent pendant during his school years. However, his current level was very limited, and his use of emotional energy was relatively shallow. He only stored it and used it to augment magic when needed. The Sword of Gryffindor, on the other hand, seemed to be able to recycle this power to permanently strengthen itself.
I don't know how those goblins managed to make this sword.
Ivan said, stroking the blade. Thinking of Harry's description, Ivan gripped the hilt of his sword to see if he could infuse the sword with his will, but despite his best efforts, there was no sign of it glowing, and his attempts to summon the Sword of Gryffindor were unsuccessful. Could she be a fake Gryffindor? Ivan was embarrassed. No, that's impossible. It must be because I didn't summon this sword with enough determination.
Do you remember how you put power into this sword, Harry?
Ivan asked, turning to Harry. Harry hesitated for a moment, remembering that he had done nothing but rush forward in a fit of anger, intent on getting rid of Nagini. Ivan didn't know whether to laugh or cry at Harry's statement. This, however, made it clear that only the purest of wills could resonate with the Sword of Gryffindor. Perhaps Dumbledore saw through Harry's recklessness and was so convinced that he could kill Nagini. With this in mind, Ivan put the Sword of Gryffindor aside, as it did not seem to suit a man who fought with his mind, and he believed more in the power of the wand.
Oh, by the way, there's something else I forgot to tell you.
Harry said, suddenly remembering something.
When I saw the professor in the other world, he told me he was expecting someone, and that if that person was willing to keep their promise, they'd be here soon.
Expecting someone.
Yvonne was startled and her brow furrowed.
Do you know who he was expecting, Harles?
Snape asked curiously.
Gellert Grindelwald.
Ivan said with certainty, then seeing their puzzled expressions, he continued.
Professor Dumbledore and he were once close friends, but they became enemies because of some ideological conflict.
Harry was dubious, finding it hard to accept that, in his youth, Professor Dumbledore had befriended a celebrated dark wizard like Grindelwald.
Professor Snape, may I trouble you to take a look at this?
Ivan asked as he retrieved a potion from the pocket of his wizarding robes and handed it to Snape. Puzzled, she reached out and took it from him. When she looked down at it, she saw that there was some dark red blood in the transparent reagent. It looked very strange.
It's Grindelwald's blood. He took some of the dark magic's damage in Dumbledore's place. Can you tell what condition he's in from this?
Ivan asked grimly. He had not stayed in Newmengard for a whole hour to set fire to the place, but to collect the blood that had dripped from Grindelwald's cut left hand. Unfortunately, there was something wrong with the blood. Otherwise, it would be a good ingredient for a dark curse and a polyjuice potion. Snape gently opened the lid and used his wand to suck out the tiny drops of blood, which floated in the air as he examined them. Having been Dumbledore's primary physician for 2 years, Snape was familiar with the properties of this strange, dark magic, and he quickly came to a conclusion.
If all goes well, he'll last about 2 months.
Snape said as he waved his wand to reattach the blood.
If you were to treat him, regardless of the cost, would you be able to save Grindelwald?
Ivan asked again.
No way, the corrosion is too deep and it's tangled up with the magic. At least I can't think of any other way.
Snape shook his head, feeling somewhat relieved. Grindelwald was not to be trifled with and was probably no easier to deal with than Voldemort, and Snape was momentarily relieved to learn that this dangerous man was about to die. Ivan did not disagree with Snape's assessment, as it was in line with his theory. What could Greenwald do when Dumbledore had spent 2 years trying to dispel this strange dark magic?
If he was going to die, why did he try to escape?
Chapter 878, The Balance's Weight.
But he must have thought he could solve this problem.
Ivan muttered to himself, which was the only explanation for Grindelwald's decision to escape rather than wait to die in Newmengardry. A dying man would not be able to keep up with the British and European newspapers all day long.
Hales, I must remind you that you have been talking for 10 minutes. I think Potter and Severus need a good rest.
Madame Pomfrey said sternly.
Very well, madame, I will leave you now.
Ivan shrugged his shoulders and did not argue with Madame Pomfrey. Snape and Harry had been through 2 battles in a row, and their minds had reached their limits. It was indeed time to get some sleep.
The Ministry of Magic should have made up a better story.
Ivan dropped the seer on the table and shook his head, speechless. Was this the story the Aurors had been racking their brains for 3 days? It was ridiculous.
And they didn't even mention Harry.
Ron said indignantly.
No, they mentioned it.
Hermione turned the Daily Prophet around and pointed to a particular page.
It says here that Professor Snape was an undercover spy sent to you-know-who by the Ministry of Magic, and that he was responsible for luring you-know-who out of hiding by passing information to the Aurors.
But they didn't say Harry killed the mystery man, did they?
Ron persisted.
Come on, Ron, I didn't know what was going on the other day.
Harry said soothingly, not caring that the Ministry was stealing the credit, since Grindelwald was the one who really deserved the credit for killing Voldemort. Yvonne nodded in agreement.
It's too complicated, and the Ministry was right to cover up part of it. All the British wizards need is confidence, and they won't want to know that the Dark Lord killed the Dark Lord.
In addition, information about Horcruxes had to be concealed, as killing a person could split one's soul and grant immortality, which was too tempting for dark wizards. The method of creating a Horcrux is little known, but it is recorded in some ancient family books.
But now you can call him Lord Voldemort.
Ivan said with a sudden laugh. Hermione and Ron were both stunned for a moment before they realized what was happening. You-know-who was dead, so why should they be afraid of him?
Yes, you-know-who.
Ron said after a moment's hesitation. Harry and the others also burst out laughing.
How many of the standard transfiguration spells have you memorized? How many of them have you figured out? Who put down the Goblin Rebellion?
Chapter 879, OWL Exams. As the day of the exam drew closer, the atmosphere in the castle became more and more tense. Even the most mischievous young wizard had to temporarily calm down and focus on the important exam that would determine the future of his life. Seamus and Neville, who shared a room with her, suffered from exam anxiety and even had to recite the standard book of spells in their dreams. However, to Ivan's surprise, Harry and Snape's relationship did not improve as much as he had expected, with only minor changes. That Snape had finally given up trying to bully them and had gone from being hostile to ignoring Harry, as if Harry Potter did not exist. Harry, in turn, was at a loss as to how to deal with the man who had once spoken such harsh words to him, but was willing to risk his life to protect him when it mattered.
It seems pretty easy.
Ivan flipped through the papers and found that the OWL exam was much easier than he had expected. It consisted mostly of basic theoretical questions that were not very advanced and could be found in the last 5 years of Charms textbooks. This rote memorization was a freebie for Ivan, who had the Ravenclaw crown. Yvonne wrote furiously, filling the exam paper in less than half an hour. Ivan spent the rest of the day thinking about how the Hogwarts exam system could be improved. The first was that the exam content was too boring or not in-depth enough. This was presumably related to the usual lessons. In order to graduate early, Ivan had read through all of the textbooks in his 7th year, but he had not seen any research or exploration into magic or magic itself. The teaching at Hogwarts was simply to teach the students about the various charms that were used to teach them how to use magic. This might be enough for the average wizard, but for Ivan, a true magical civilization required a large number of inquisitive academic wizards. Just as Muggles are assiduous in their quest for scientific knowledge, wizards can transform the world by learning more about the nature of magic. Ivan was confident of this, as the more he studied the subject, the more he understood the potential of magic. Many of the existing magical systems involved the application of space and time, and the Philosopher's Stone created by Nicholas Flamel could completely change the nature of matter. This is something that science has struggled to accomplish for centuries and is an advantage of magic. Ivan found it a great pity that many of the more advanced charms had been lost, as most wizards cherished their magic and focused only on academic wizarding. This was especially true in the case of alchemy, as goblins today simply could not produce a second sword of Gryffindor, and wizards were at their wits' end with the time turner. If the Ministry of Magic's Department of Mysteries were ever burned to the ground, time travel would be impossible. Such a situation was naturally not what Ivan wanted to see. It had to change. Schools are the best breeding ground for the spirit of inquiry. In his 5th year, Snape was able to single-handedly develop practical charms such as
The shadowless blade.
and
The bell upside down.
as well as improve the potion making. Ivan found it hard to believe that such a top-notch researcher would have been neglected at Hogwarts at the time. If it had been a Muggle high school, they would have received all kinds of awards. This was partly due to the chaos in the wizarding community and Snape's dislike of publicity, but also because Hogwarts's education system was not perfect enough to bring these research geniuses to light. There are also George and Fred, who are extremely gifted in the creation of magical objects, and who would shine in a classroom if there were an alchemical one at Hogwarts.
There are 3 other potions that, in addition to the stop curse and the restorative charm, can quickly undo petrification. Why didn't I think of that at the time?
Hermione said ruefully, thinking Flitwick would have deducted points if he had noticed.
You didn't answer any questions, Hermione. This isn't a potions test. I only wrote those 3 as insurance.
Ivan looked at the witch, who was still struggling with her answer.
You have to have a little faith in yourself. No one will do better in theory than you.
Chapter 880, Special Graduate Exams.
By the way, Ivan, don't you have to take both the NEWTS? Don't tell me they sent you 2 sets.
Hermione asked curiously, suddenly remembering. If she wasn't mistaken, the 5th year and 7th year students' exams were held almost side by side over the course of a few days, and would never have been caught in time unless the time turner was used. Ivan shook his head and explained.
I'm skipping a grade, so I won't be taking the exam with the other 7th years. The Ministry of Magic will make time for me on my own, and I'm told there will be a lot of people coming. It's bound to be more difficult than the normal NEWT.
He was, technically, the first ever examinee to graduate early at Hogwarts, and even with Pierce's special approval, he had to be convincing. Hearing Ivan's words, Harry and the others became interested in the special exam, but the thought of having to take another OWL in the afternoon gave them a headache.
My God, even Minister for Magic Pierce and the Master of the Order of Merlin, Goshawk, are here.
Ron looked at the proctors on the stage and was speechless. This was the first time he had seen such a scene.
Go on, Ivan. I'm sure you'll be fine.
Hermione said encouragingly, and Harry and Ron patted Ivan on the shoulder to cheer him on.
Of course, you don't say.
Ivan smiled and nodded, then walked past the trio to the exam table. Richard Goshawk, who was chatting with a few professors, was the first to notice Ivan's arrival. He took a few steps forward happily and said emotionally,
It's been a long time, Hals. When I gave you the Order of Merlin, I knew you'd achieve something.
Ivan replied humbly, impressed by Richard Goshawk's integrity and lack of pedantry. After exchanging pleasantries with Goshawk, Ivan turned to greet acting Minister Piers, Proctor Tofty, and Marchbanks. Notably, the Daily Prophet also sent a reporter, an old acquaintance of Ivan's, Rita Skeeter. However, in the few months that she had not seen her, Rita Skeeter looked much more haggard. When she faced Ivan, she still had a formulaic smile on her face, but deep down, she was deeply frightened. As a veteran gossip reporter, Rita Skeeter naturally understood what had happened during the riot at the newspaper 6 months earlier, and had a vague idea of how her boss had been retired. If she had been angry at Ivan for threatening her with this information before, she was now afraid of revenge. Ivan made small talk with Rita Skeeter as usual. Although he did not like this gossip reporter, he had to admit that she was very talented at fooling the people and reversing public opinion. If she controlled it well, she might become a sharp blade that could slash her enemies.
It's about time, Hales. Now, please get to the examination stage.
McGonagall glanced at the clock and interrupted Ivan's small talk. Ivan nodded and made his way to the middle of the room, where he stood facing everyone. Since today was a practical lesson on transfiguration, charms, divination, and defense against the dark arts, he did not have a desk and chair in front of him, only a small table about the height of a man. Professor McGonagall looked at Pierce for permission from the acting minister, then cleared her throat and spoke.
Then the exam begins now. The first round is a transfiguration, and the target of the transfiguration is the wooden platform in front of you, which can be transformed into any animal.
I understand, Professor.
Ivan gestured to the invigilators on the stage. With a gentle flick of his wrist, the wooden platform in front of him began to transform as if it had melted. In the blink of an eye, the entire wooden platform was engulfed in flames, causing Hermione to jump in shock, thinking that Ivan's spell had gone awry. McGonagall and the others who were in charge of invigilating had looks of deep surprise on their faces. The next second, a pleasant immortal cry sounded in the hall. A golden-red phoenix soared out of the flames and hovered over the great hall, its wings beating furiously. Red flames surrounded it, and the flames of its tail fell from the sky like brilliant fireworks. The young wizards who were watching exclaimed, and even the Ministry of Magic's commissioners stared.
Impressive, this is a...
Professor Marchbanks muttered to himself, looking up in wonder at the phoenix soaring above the great hall. Peel and the others were equally stunned by Ivan's skill in transfiguration. If they hadn't seen him cast the spell, they would have thought he was a real phoenix.
Those flames.
Professor McGonagall asked eagerly. She could transform into a phoenix-like creature, but she would never give it the ability to control fire.
Well, if you'll excuse me for a moment, Professor McGonagall.
Ivan said with a resigned shrug. During the transformation, he felt the phoenix blood in his body suddenly being triggered, and the phoenix. Chapter 881, Mr. Hales can handle such a small scene. The chirping phoenix circled in the air a few times before slowly landing on the table in front of the invigilators. Pierce, McGonagall, Flitwick, and the others leaned in to get a closer look at the magical creature. Marchbanks was tempted to touch it, but he accidentally burned himself on the flames surrounding the phoenix. The crowd was now 100% certain that this was real fire, and not some false vision.
Incredible.
Professor McGonagall murmured to herself. As a transfiguration master herself, she was more surprised than anyone present. Since Yvonne was reluctant to talk about it, she kept her curiosity to herself. Seeing that the invigilators were circling around his phoenix, and silently touching it for a long time without announcing the final result, Ivan had no choice but to remind them.
May I ask if I passed, Professor?
Of course, it's the best transfiguration I've ever seen.
Marchbanks exclaimed. She had been in charge of the examinations authority for over a century, and had seen her fair share of geniuses. The most impressive of these was the NEWT exam that Albus Dumbledore had taken in the late 20th century, when he was so skilled at transfiguration that even she, an examiner, was impressed. Marchbanks thought that after that experience, he would never again be surprised by an examinee's outstanding performance in his lifetime. He did not expect that there was no limit to a genius. Professor McGonagall was impressed.
Hales, I'm afraid you've surpassed me in terms of transfiguration. I don't think even Headmaster Albus could have done better.
McGonagall's praise for Dumbledore was nothing short of astonishing. Dumbledore was widely acknowledged to be the most powerful wizard in the British wizarding community, and even after his death, wizards of the British wizarding community still held him in high esteem. And Dumbledore is known for his transformation charm.
Hogwarts should have a higher rating than outstanding.
Richard Goshawk joked, grinning. If other students' brilliant results in transfiguration are due to the others' ability, Ivan's is due solely to the fact that outgoing is the highest rating they can give.
For the second exam, we'll go straight to actual combat practice, shall we, Mr.?
Ivan said nonchalantly. Pierce immediately signaled to the Aurors in charge of maintaining order in the Great Hall, and 3 of them moved out of the crowd and stood in a semicircle opposite Ivan.
They're the Ministry's crack hitters, and they're going to attack you, and what you need to do is defend or break the spell they're using.
Pierce explained.
Wait a minute, Minister Pierce. Isn't this going too far?
Professor McGonagall asked, frowning at the 3 hitters.
Hales may be a pretty good spellcaster, but he's still just a kid, and we can't expect a young wizard who hasn't even graduated to take on 3 seasoned hitters.
Piers's expression grew strange at her words, and he wondered if she had misunderstood the term. A man who had the nerve to storm the Ministry of Magic and kill the minister, beating up the Dark Lord in Knockoff Alley, was not a child. He usually called it a monster. However, Pierce naturally did not have the courage to say so in front of everyone, so he explained again.
I think Mr. Hales is perfectly capable of handling such a small situation. Last year, he was in a much more dangerous situation than this when he was fighting the dragons and merpeople.
Professor McGonagall's words trailed off, as she was well aware of Ivan's strength and the fact that he had once saved Harry from Lord Voldemort with Sirius.
What do you think, Harles?
Professor McGonagall asked, after much hesitation, leaving the decision to Ivan.
I believe in Minister Pierce's arrangements.
Ivan replied with a shrug. Without Professor McGonagall to stop him, Pierce waved his hand and turned to the beaters.
Thompson, you may begin.
In case anyone made a mistake due to fear, he personally selected the 3 hitters for the exam. These people did not know that the young wizard in front of them was the one in control of the Ministry of Magic, so they did not show any fear before the battle. As Pierce had predicted, Thompson and the others gripped their wands and focused on Ivan. They had just witnessed Ivan's incredible transfiguration skill, so they naturally did not look down on him. More importantly, there were so many people watching them now. If the 3 of them were to be defeated by a brat because of their carelessness, they would lose all their face. In contrast to the cautiousness of the 3 hitters, Ivan appeared relaxed and even casually slipped his wand into his pocket. This almost contemptuous move made Thompson and the others furious. They did not care about numbers and attacked first.
Langlock throat locked. Apugno, 10,000 bullets fired. Excelarmus, excluding your weapon.
Chapter 882. Give them a taste of their own medicine. Seeing how dangerous the situation was, Harry and the others were extremely nervous. They wanted to warn Ivan to dodge, but before they could say anything, the scarlet beam of light arrived in front of him. Ivan's expression did not change. He tapped his index finger in the air and a silvery white barrier of magic appeared. Red light and flying gravel hit it, causing ripples.
Spellcast without a staff.
Marchbanks exclaimed, his eyes wide and his hands on the table. Flitwick was equally surprised but corrected him.
It should be no stick, no spell.
While they were talking, Ivan made another move. He bent his right hand slightly and snapped his fingers. With a crisp sound, the sharp rocks that had yet to hit the ground quickly transformed into sharp, short spears that scattered towards the 3 people in front of him. From passive defense to attack, a series of actions were completed in just 2 seconds.
Do we have to continue with the second exam, Professor?
Professor McGonagall was the first to regain her composure.
No, you don't have to. You've passed Hal's.
She said, smiling ruefully at Thompson and the others. Although she knew that Ivan's strength was extraordinary, she did not expect it to be so exaggerated. The 3 elite Aurors were defeated in a single exchange. Even the Invigilators could not have done it, let alone the students. It must be noted that in the original exam plan, Ivan only had to find a way to hold out against the hitters for a while, break and resist a few charms. Ivan, however, was unable to keep his cool and decided to give them a taste of their own medicine.
Impressive. I can't imagine anyone mastering such high-end magical skills at such a young age.
Richard Goshawk exclaimed in admiration as he clapped his hands. He had tried to overestimate Ivan as much as possible, but Ivan had repeatedly shattered his expectations. Pierce, Marchbanks, and the others had no objections, and Flitwick even dismissed the upcoming charms test as unnecessary, as Ivan's wandless, non-charm-inducing skills put even Flitwick, a charms professor, to shame. Although magic is the embodiment of a wizard's will, traditional wands, charms, and gestures are merely tools to reduce the difficulty of casting spells, and any wizard can theoretically gradually reduce the number of steps required to cast a spell after painstaking training. For example, these professors basically mastered similar techniques in their respective areas of expertise. They could omit 1 or 2 spell-casting steps when necessary, so as to gain the upper hand in battle and suppress the enemy. However, it was almost impossible to cast spells freely without any external help. Flitwick had the impression that only Headmaster Dumbledore and Lord Voldemort, other than Ivan, were capable of such a feat. Ivan smiled and ignored the compliments, modestly attributing his
Little.
achievements to the professor's guidance.
With the help of Headmaster Dumbledore, of course.
Said Ivan, adding that he always had to find a good reason for growing so fast, and that Dumbledore's death would cover it up perfectly.
No wonder.
Said Richard Goshawk.
But there's no one else to teach you.
The second exam ended without incident, and the rest of the charms exam was naturally not a problem for Ivan. He pulled out his wand again and demonstrated all the basic charms in the most standard of poses, and soon received unanimous approval from McGonagall and the others. Only the final divination lesson gave Ivan a headache, as Trelawney, the head examiner, insisted that he find the so-called harbinger of fate in a polished crystal ball. Ivan forced himself to stare at the crystal ball for 5 minutes, lost in thought, unable to see anything but his own reflection. Irritated, he used legilimency to cheat, giving the answer that Trelawney had hoped for the most, thus saving his outstanding result.
Congratulations, Mr. Harles, you have passed all of your NEWTS. No, it should be called perfect.
Chapter 883, Completed Mission and Secret Keeper.
You're amazing, Ivan. I knew you could do it.
Hermione gave Ivan a big hug, as excited as if she had just passed an exam.
As the first Hogwarts student ever to graduate above her class, you're bound to go down in history. I can't believe we're graduating together this year.
George and Fred giggled. Yvonne hugged Hermione, then turned to the Weasleys and asked,
Have you thought about what you're going to do after you graduate?
We're going to keep running the joke shop, of course. We've even rented a shop in the busiest part of Knockoff Alley. It'll open in a few days.
George said happily. After several years of hard work, they were finally able to gain Mrs. Weasley's approval to conduct research openly and sell joke toys. However, this was on the condition that they did not fail their NEWT exam. Otherwise, they would definitely be scolded.
I'd like to congratulate you both in advance,
Ivan said with a smile, pushing the thought aside. He had intended to involve George and Fred in the study of the magicalization of Muggle technology, considering their talents in the development of alchemical objects, but decided against it. There were supposed to be plenty of alchemists in the Department of Mysteries, and there was really no need for George and Fred to leave their favorite careers behind.
What about you, Ivan? Are you going to join the Ministry of Magic after you graduate?
Fred asked curiously. He had little interest in politics, but it was clear from his graduation exams that many of the bigwigs in the wizarding community thought very highly of Ivan. Even the Daily Prophet praised him. Fred even believed that Ivan could break the record again and become Minister for Magic before he was 25, if he chose to.
No, the Ministry of Magic is not for me. I'll probably go back to teaching at Hogwarts,
Ivan said, shaking his head. The position of Minister for Magic was of less importance to powerful wizards like them. Heavy government affairs and complex political struggles would instead consume a great deal of valuable time, and being the Minister for Magic behind the scenes was the best course of action. After all, unlike Muggles, wizards did not need to rely on clustering for power to secure their position. It would be no trouble at all to have him at the head of Hogwarts if one day he was required to do so, as the position of headmaster of Hogwarts was no different from that of Minister for Magic.
That's a pity. If you'd been made minister, we'd have had our way in the wizarding world,
George quipped ruefully. Ivan didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so that was what the two of them were planning. Just as he was about to say something, the system notification sounded in his head. Mission: The Rise of the Dark Lord completed. Objective: Rule the British wizarding community. Task progress 100%. Legendary points.
What's wrong, Ivan?
George and Fred asked when Ivan didn't say anything.
Nothing, I just saw Minister Pierce looking for me. I have to go over.
Ivan lied.
Then you'd better hurry. It's probably the ministry trying to give you a medal or something.
Hermione urged. Ivan nodded, then used his magical mark to send a message to Pierce. He then left the foyer and headed for the outskirts of the castle. Pierce, who was chatting with his old friends, paused for a moment. He quickly bid Richard Goshawk and the others farewell and strode after them. Pierce looked around to make sure no one was around and asked nervously.
Sir Harles, did you call me here for something urgent?
He even suspected that the other party was unhappy because he had not arranged the exam procedures properly and caused the atmosphere to not be lively enough.
You've been doing very well lately, Pierce.
Ivan asked casually. Pierce's heart skipped a beat and he quickly explained.
We've caught 15 Death Eaters and several werewolves who were hiding so well that the Aurors didn't find them until last night. I was going to catch all of them and notify you. I hope so.
Ivan stared at Pierce for a moment, but decided not to expose his intentions.
What about the Secret Keeper? Did you find him? It was verified that the Secret Keeper was Pettigrew Peter.
Pierce exclaimed, wiping the cold sweat from his forehead.
The Unknown One transfigured him into a half-infernal monster, then wiped his memory and buried him underground.
No wonder.
Chapter 884, International Confederation of Wizards.
That's what you get for following the wrong man.
Ivan sneered. Peter Pettigrew, fearful of Lord Voldemort's power and influence, was willing to betray his friends and work for him, but he had forgotten that it was not easy to be a Death Eater. Lord Voldemort was cruel not only to his enemies, but also to his own people, and so-called Death Eaters were seen by Lord Voldemort as lowly slaves who could be abandoned if needed.
You're right, Pettigrew deserved it.
Pierce quickly agreed, then seemed to remember something and said hesitantly.
By the way, Sir Harles, the International Confederation of Wizards would like to see you.
Me?
Yvonne raised her eyebrows, more or less confused. Why would the International Confederation of Wizards suddenly want to see her? Could Grindelwald be involved? Even so, he should have talked to Pierce directly. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, he had Pierce report to the International Confederation of Wizards without mentioning anything about himself.
I suspect they may have found some evidence against you.
Explained Pierce carefully.
Is that so?
Yvonne glanced at Pierce, wondering if the acting minister was tired of living and was trying to get in her way. How else could he have found out about her, a young wizard who had yet to graduate? On second thought, however, Ivan dismissed the possibility. Pierce was not stupid enough to get in touch with the Confederation and plot against him, as the legilimency feedback confirmed.
Do you know what they figured out?
Ivan asked after a moment.
They suspect you had something to do with Grindelwald's escape.
Pierce said succinctly.
What makes these people think that?
Yvonne was suddenly amused. The International Confederation of Wizards was ridiculous. What good would it do him to let Grindelwald go?
I don't know about that,
said Pierce sheepishly. In fact, he, like the International Confederation of Wizards, suspected that Ivan was behind Grindelwald's escape. After all, the Dark Lord had been in prison for over 50 years, and Ivan had only been in touch with him for a few days when Grindelwald suddenly ran away. He would not believe that there was no connection. Perhaps Ivan had been planning some sort of secret plot to get them released.
It does seem a bit like the Muggle United Nations,
thought Ivan, rubbing his chin.
And the international situation in the wizarding world is somewhat similar to the Muggle one.
The war that Grindelwald started 50 years ago, equivalent to World War I and World War II, devastated the wizarding world of Europe, enabling the rise of new wizards in North America. Due to the distance from the European continent, Britain's situation was supposed to be better than that of other countries, but shortly after Grindelwald's defeat, a local Lord Voldemort came to the country, entangling a group of Death Eaters to persecute non-pureblood fellow wizards in Britain. If it were a bit more conspiratorial, Ivan would suspect that Lord Voldemort was a spy trained by the Magical Congress of North America.
Do you need me to rebuff them, Sir Harles?
Pierce suggested, seeing Ivan's dislike of the International Wizarding Organization.
No.
Ivan sneered.
If they want to see me so badly, then so be it.
England was his territory, and Ivan wanted to see what these people could do.
Understood.
Pierce said, nodding.
I'll send someone to the Wizarding Union to arrange a meeting.
After saying goodbye to Pierce, Ivan returns to the Gryffindor lounge alone. After a while, Ivan was surprised to find that the lounge had changed. The walls were decorated with brilliant lights and a scarlet lion flag hung in the air. In the middle of the room was a large banner with the names of every graduate. Was this a graduation party?
You're the only one left, Ivan.
George and Fred happily dragged Ivan into the lounge, where the Gryffindor wizards surrounded him and bombarded him with questions about Minister Pierce's reward.
They must have paid you a fortune in galleons, didn't they? You're the first ever wizard to graduate early at Hogwarts.
Ron exclaimed hopefully.
That's tacky.
Seamus spat.
I bet the Ministry is putting you in the British archives.
Chapter 885, The Aggressive Wizarding Federation.
This is Director Canal of the North American Magical Congress.
Pierce introduced one of the wizards, who was lean and capable.
How do you do, Madam Director?
Ivan asked, extending his hand to shake Connor's.
I've heard of you, Harles.
Canal's face lit up with amusement, but he looked at Ivan searchingly.
The papers say you're the most gifted wizard in Britain, Dumbledore's favorite. Headmaster Dumbledore is always happy to lend a helping hand to students who ask him for help.
Ivan said vaguely, not wanting to sound too friendly with Dumbledore until he knew exactly why Dumbledore was there.
May I ask what brings you here so urgently, Sergeant Canal?
Ivan added.
Hars, can you tell me where you were the day Grindelwald escaped?
Canal asked Ivan, his smile fading. Yvonne did not hesitate.
At Hogwarts, of course.
Don't try to lie to my face.
Connor interrupted, his face dark before Ivan could finish.
As far as we know, you were not at Hogwarts when Grindelwald attacked. You were seen arriving half an hour later. In addition, when the International Confederation of Wizards received a letter from Minister Pierce, they immediately dispatched Aurors to investigate. According to their report, traces of the three men's spell casting were found near Nurmengard.
Connor enunciated each word carefully. This doesn't mean anything.
Well, as you say, Director Connor, I was no longer at Hogwarts, but at Newmend.
Canal was surprised by Ivan's sudden change of heart, but he did not dwell on it, instead continuing to question him.
What were you doing in Newmengard at that hour? I received a report from Winky, the house elf, that Voldemort had gone there and was fighting Grindelwald.
Ivan explained patiently.
A house elf, why would it know that?
Connor persisted.
Newmengard has been abandoned for many years, and Grindelwald is the only prisoner in it. Without the care of a house elf, I'm afraid he would have died a long time ago. Don't tell me you don't understand that, Director Connor.
Ivan said sarcastically, annoyed by the series of questions. Canal took no notice of Ivan's prickly tone and said slowly.
I was just wondering why the house elf would want to share this information with you. Besides, if you knew Grindelwald was fighting Lord Voldemort, why did you go to Newmengard? Get to the point, Director Connor. What is it you want to know?
Ivan's face hardened.
Did you release Grindelwald?
Connor asked aggressively.
Why would I do that? There's nothing for me in letting him out.
Scoffed Ivan. That may not be the case. 50 years ago, there were many wizards of your talents who fell under Grindelwald's spell.
Considering that you're not of age yet, I can spare you. As long as you cooperate with our investigation, the International Confederation of Wizards will never make things difficult for you.
This is Director Canal of the North American Magical Congress. Pierce introduced one of the wizards, who was lean and capable. How do you do, Madam Director? Ivan asked, extending his hand to shake Connor's. I've heard of you, Harles. Canal's face lit up with amusement, but he looked at Ivan searchingly. The papers say you're the most gifted wizard in Britain, Dumbledore's favorite. Headmaster Dumbledore is always happy to lend a helping hand to students who ask him for help.
I had nothing to do with Grindelwald's escape, and I can answer your questions.
Ivan's patience was wearing thin.
That's because I was the only one at Hogwarts who was able to get away unscathed from Grindelwald and Lord Voldemort. The house elves knew that and did not go to anyone else.
Canal was so amused by Ivan's words that the Aurors behind him burst out laughing.
I read yesterday's paper, and I admit you're very talented, Harles, but Grindelwald's power is far beyond your imagination.
Chapter 886, Pierce, I will never allow anyone to do whatever they want in Britain. As Canal thought this, a sudden feeling of dread came over him.
Have you ever really seen a genius, Director Connor?
Ivan said casually, his eyes turning orange and vertical. A terrifying dragon might gradually fill the relatively spacious classroom. Connor stared into those eyes and felt as if death had him by the throat, and his breath was being sucked out of him. In a trance, Ivan Howells seemed to grow larger and larger, until he was as small as an ant in the ground.
If the Director General has any doubts about what I'm telling you, you can come and try it for yourself.
Ivan stepped forward, and the faint sound of his shoes on the floor was like the sound of a war drum. Canal swallowed hard, shuddering, his hand shaking as he held the wand. Before today, he would never have believed that he would one day be suppressed by a young wizard to the point of being unable to move. The young wizard in front of him even reminded him of Grindelwald, who had attacked the North American Magical Congress building a few days ago. That incomparably terrifying man had forcibly taken the vice president of the Congress away in front of all of them. The 60 or so guards responsible for guarding the Aurors had been easily defeated by him. Connor would never forget the way Grindelwald looked at him before he left, the way Grindelwald looked at a stray dog.
Expelliarmus, Expelliarmus.
The Aurors in the front row attacked first, roaring as if they were venting their anger. Almost at the same time, the two colleagues behind him attacked in unison. Two more beams of light of various colors flew towards Ivan. It's over.
How dare you?
Canal hissed through gritted teeth, his anger reaching its peak, but under Ivan's cold gaze, the noise that had been so loud at first grew weaker and weaker until it was barely audible.
Don't you slander me, Director Connor. It's these Aurors who are openly attacking an innocent student at Hogwarts.
Ivan corrected him with a raised eyebrow, then waved his wand and continued.
Also, my wand is here. If the International Confederation of Wizards has any doubts, you can test it. I only cast a few defensive charms at best. The exploding spells, petrification spells, and disarming spells were the work of these Aurors.
All he did was reflect their charms back at them. Connor nearly fainted from anger at Ivan's shamelessness, but he was wary of Ivan's ability to defeat 3 Aurors so easily, so he turned to Pierce, whom he had forgotten, hoping that the Minister for Magic would help him put pressure on him. Pierce, however, seemed to have gone blind, as he remained silent during the confrontation, not even glancing in his direction. Seeing that Connor was not going to give up, Ivan sneered and said to Pierce,
Minister Pierce, does the International Confederation of Wizards have the right to attack people indiscriminately in Britain? Of course not,
said the statue-like Pierce, coming to life with a sense of justice.
I would never allow anyone to do as they please in the British and British magical community, not even the chief executive of the North American Magical Congress. Director Connor, I would like to invite you and several of your subordinates to the Ministry of Magic for a review.
Pierce said sternly. He clapped his hands, and a few seconds later, Dawlish and a dozen hitters burst through the door and surrounded the wizards.
Aren't we supposed to be on the same team? That's not what you said before.
Canal was stunned, and before he knew what was happening, he was knocked to the ground by the attacker. Connor almost wondered if the young wizard in front of him was Pierce's illegitimate son.
Wait, Mr. Harles, I'm afraid this is a...
Ivan asked curiously, gesturing for Dawlish to wait.
You said before that if they had any doubts about your words, they could test them out themselves.
Connor explained, feeling very aggrieved.
I see.
Ivan said, suddenly remembering that he had said this before. He looked at Connor and said,
But remember, next time, you have to show dueling etiquette before a friendly exchange.
Chapter 921. 921, It won't be long before they come back to beg our 2 years ago. Chapter 887, It won't be long before they come back to beg our.
I will definitely relay Mr. Harles's warning to them.
Ivan stared at Connor for a long moment before gesturing to Dawlish to remove the curse on the Aurors of the International Confederation of Wizards. After regaining consciousness, these Aurors were much more obedient than before. They did not shout as soon as they arrived, and their faces were even more flustered. The three of them had joined forces to deal with an underage brat, but they were actually defeated in a single move. They wished they could find a hole to hide in so that they could not force themselves back. Fortunately, recalling the Daily Prophet's article from the previous day, they were able to quickly readjust their mindset, and the British hitters suffered the same fate as they did. However, they did not expect the Daily Prophet to report truthfully without boasting.
Mr. Harles, please forgive us for our previous transgressions.
After calming the Aurors, Canal looked at Ivan and said nervously,
If there are no other instructions, we will take our leave.
So you've run out of questions.
Yvonne said. Connor's mouth twitched. He hadn't finished the question, of course, but he had to be brave enough to ask it.
The whole story is clear. I will report to the president that you had nothing to do with Grindelwald's escape.
Connor said respectfully. He didn't feel any pressure to say this, as Ivan was far more powerful than they had anticipated, which meant the chances of him being bewitched were slim. If Ivan and Grindelwald were working together, Grindelwald would not have been the only one to attack the Congress building a few days earlier. In the face of a combined attack from two powerful wizards and a large number of British Aurors, Connor had little doubt that MACUSA would not survive long enough for reinforcements to arrive and would be wiped out. Ivan nodded and left them alone, waving them off. Pierce, on the other hand, looked at the hitters and instructed.
Dawlish, please escort Director Connor.
Connor opened his mouth to retort but stopped himself, afraid that he would not be able to leave if he said anything more.
After you, Madam Director.
Dawlish said, extending her hand gracefully. She looked completely different from the fierce-looking woman who had barged in earlier. Connor adjusted his torn robe and left with Dawlish. Soon, only the two of them were left in the wide classroom. Pierce waited until they were out of sight before turning to Ivan and asking worriedly.
Are we just going to let them go?
What else could it be?
Yvonne asked curiously. Pierce smiled sheepishly, expecting Ivan to simply kill anyone who crossed him or alter their memories.
These are dangerous times.
Ivan said quietly.
The North American magic and France are very strict when it comes to investigating Aurors who go out. It will be difficult if we are discovered.
Although the memory charm was useful, it was not without flaws. Once it was discovered, it would greatly worsen the relationship between the two parties. The head of the department had his memory altered, and this was against the rules. North America would never let this go. However, the battle just now was different. Although it was a slap to the other party's face, it also showed their strength. The target of the demonstration was only the three Aurors. With Grindelwald as a common enemy, North America and France could no longer afford to get on the wrong side of a gifted wizard and the British Ministry of Magic. In order to regain his dignity, the Aurors would definitely praise his spell-casting skills and promote him. Pierce thought about it for a moment, then figured it out. His worried expression vanished, replaced by a look of excitement. Previous generations of North American wizards and witches had been so proud of their power that they thought they had lost a powerful and feared wizard after Dumbledore's death. For a mere executive director to think that he was on par with the British Minister for Magic and speak without the slightest hint of respect, Pierce was naturally unhappy with them.
So what do we do next? If someone from North America comes to work with us in a few days, should we consider agreeing?
Pierce asked. Grindelwald's presence posed a problem, and it would be difficult for a British wizard to track him down.
We'll hold them off for now, of course. Grindelwald shouldn't be coming to England anytime soon. It's not like we're the ones who should be worried.
Chapter 888, Ivan, is this another imagination from that bastard? As Ivan was thinking, a system prompt suddenly sounded in his head. Ding, new mission generated. Ivan paused for a moment, then opened the mission list to check. Mission objective, dominate the wizarding world. Task progress 2%. Task reward, legendary points *5. Task description, after stabilizing Britain's power, you can't wait to look further. In order to extend your influence to every corner of the globe, You treacherously freed Grindelwald from his declining years and allowed him to do as he pleased in the wizarding world. The rising smoke over the continent would be your best asset for promotion. Remarks, you don't think the International Confederation of Wizards will be able to handle this problem, and it won't be long before they come back begging for your help.
Farrell, the vice president of the North American Magical Congress, has been caught.
Taken aback by the suddenness of the news, Pierce asked uncertainly.
When did this happen? Just 2 days ago.
Ivan paused and looked at Pierce with displeasure.
Didn't the ministry hear about something this big?
Pierce smiled sheepishly. He had only been in charge of the British Ministry of Magic for a few months, and he had stolen it in what amounted to a coup d'etat. He had a lot of stuff on his hands, and the entire intelligence community needed to be cleaned up. He was in no mood to deal with riots in North America.
No wonder they came to England in such a hurry.
Pierce muttered. However, it surprised Pierce that Ivan was able to get hold of the information so quickly. Could he have planted people in North America? Ivan made no attempt to explain. He could not very well claim that he had obtained this information from Connor's head. Given this, Ivan changed the subject.
What do you know about this Farrell fellow? Grindelwald would never do anything pointless, and if he chose to attack the Congress building in his worst condition just to get him, then he must be very important. Farrell?
Pierce muttered, the name familiar to him.
If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Vice Chairman was one of the heroes of the Wizarding War more than 50 years ago.
Is that so?
Ivan rubbed his chin, then had an idea and said.
So he's Grindelwald's enemy. Of course.
Pierce nodded, wondering why Yvonne was asking. It was obvious. After receiving confirmation from Pierce, Ivan's expression suddenly turned ugly. After a long while, he said solemnly,
I'm afraid we have to face Gellert Grindelwald in his prime. Have you got everything you need, Allison?
Chapter 889, Dark Magic Ritual 1. Why would Grindelwald bring a no-match here? Could it be a sacrifice for some dark magic ritual? Despite himself, Farrell was curious, and his eyes opened wider. The witch, Allison, was also taken aback by Grindelwald's sudden appearance and began to stammer.
I've put all those ingredients in as you ordered, but I'm not sure I'm up to the job, sir.
Grindelwald approached the cauldron, keeping an eye on the brewing, and said,
Take it easy, Allison. I trust your skill with potions. You always did well at Durmstrang, didn't you? Potions are your strength.
Allison nodded fearfully, looking a little apprehensive despite Grindelwald's knowledge of potion brewing, which was beyond her knowledge, and the amount of ingredients used and what had to be done next.
Don't forget our common goal.
Grindelwald said soothingly as he gently stirred the cauldron with his wand. When the boiling liquid in the cauldron had calmed down, he turned to Allison and continued.
Now that the preparations are complete, we can move on to the next step.
Allison hesitated, her eyes moving to the middle-aged man following Grindelwald.
You're not thinking about your no-match father, are you, Allison? Or have you forgotten how he treated you?
Grindelwald asked coldly.
Of course, I haven't forgotten any of this.
Allison exclaimed.
He's a rogue drunk, a complete villain.
Grindelwald's lips curled into a smile.
Well said, Allison. He may be your father, but he has done nothing for you but pain, and the wizarding world is your true home.
Grindelwald said gently, placing his hand on the witch's shoulder. Allison sobbed quietly, tears rolling down her cheeks.
If you're against it, I'll choose someone else. He's not the only one for this ritual, anyone else would.
No.
Allison interrupted Grindelwald, wiping tears from her eyes.
I've wanted to kill him for a long time.
She said, glaring at the middle-aged man.
If his death would be of any use to you, so much the better.
Grindelwald's eyes twinkled as he used legilimency to determine Allison's determination. He nodded in satisfaction, then removed a pendant from around his neck and slipped it onto his right hand. Farrell stared at it. Grindelwald raised his finger slightly towards the no-mage, and a faint green light gathered at the tip of his finger.
Avada Kedavra, Avada Kedavra.
Grindelwald coldly chanted. A dark green beam of light flashed through the air, and the no-mage who was standing in the room in a daze froze for a moment. Then, its eyes glazed over and it collapsed to the ground. Farrell's pupils contracted at the sight of a life being snuffed out in front of him, and the feeling of powerlessness made him sick. However, he still did not reveal his intentions and did not say a word the entire time, because if he did, his fate would be the same as that nomad.
Let's do it.
Grindelwald said to Allison, floating in midair. Allison took a deep breath, opened the package on the floor, waved her wand, and began to read.
A father's bone, inadvertently donated, will give birth to your son. The meat of a servant.
Allison said in a trembling voice, her left arm hanging over the cauldron and her right hand gripping her wand.
If you do it fast enough, it won't hurt much, Allison. When I come back to life, your arm will be back on your arm.
Grindelwald drifted around the witch, his eyes shining with a strange light of encouragement.
For all I know, you're a brave witch, aren't you? Prove it.
Allison gritted her teeth and was about to cast a spell when a voice called out.
Don't let him fool you, witch.
Farrell, who had been pretending to be unconscious, finally spoke up. Allison's hesitation made him realize that this was the best time for him to intervene.
This man in front of you is a murderous maniac who has tried to destroy an entire Muggle city. I don't know what he promised you, but I can assure you that it was all a lie. Think about it. You're standing in the presence of the Dark Lord, widely acknowledged throughout the wizarding world. 50 years ago, many others like you were duped by him and lost their lives for no apparent reason. At the end of the day, he's just trying to use you, witch. Once he's done with you, he'll cast you aside without mercy.
Farrell spoke rapidly, trying to reverse Allison's position. Grindelwald was dead, and despite the presence of his spirit body, he could tell from what he knew of the ghosts that they were incapable of magic. As long as he could convince Allison to change sides, not only would he be able to keep his life, but he would also be able to use this opportunity to completely end the Dark Lord. At this thought, Farrell spoke again.
Turn back, witch. I am sure you are not one to willingly associate with evil, and now that Grindelwald can do nothing, you need not fear him anymore.
I've put all those ingredients in as you ordered, but I'm not sure I'm up to the job, sir.
Don't you remember how your mother died, Allison?
Grindelwald said coldly, staring into the witch's eyes.
Shall I refresh your memory?
Chapter 890, His Return from the Fire. Grindelwald's questioning words caused Allison to panic, and she stumbled back in pain, shaking her head wildly, looking deranged.
It wasn't me.
Accident. You believe the memories the Aurors wove for you.
Grindelwald's lips curled into a smile, but his words were crueler than ever, as if the death penalty had been read aloud.
You knew the truth all along, didn't you? You killed her yourself.
No, that's not right. It's not like that.
Allison's body froze and she screamed in a daze. Grindelwald went on relentlessly.
When you were 8 years old, you began to show signs of wizarding talent and performed all kinds of magical feats. But your parents were deeply religious and believed that all miracles must go to the Lord or the devil's power.
Allison's face contorted as the painful memories that had been suppressed in her brain resurfaced. Due to her unusual behavior after her awakening, her parents, who were devout believers, soon brought her to the church to find out if her weirdness was a blessing from the Lord or if she was possessed by an evil spirit. The priest in the chapel did not hesitate to choose the latter in order to earn money, telling her parents that they had to be baptized weekly to be completely eradicated. Unfortunately, such deception could not suppress her magical talent, and the uncontrolled power continued to disrupt her life irregularly. However, her father apparently believed in the claim of possession, regarding her as a complete freak. Her mother was very protective of her, as usual, but Allison could never forget the look of fear in her mother's eyes. To make matters worse, the weekly baptisms quickly drained the family's meager savings, causing his already irritable father to grow increasingly violent under the pressure of debt and to suffer from alcoholism and gambling. In the end, she blamed all of her life's misfortunes on her. When she was in a bad mood, she would either hit or scold her mother. Even though her mother wanted to stop her, there was nothing she could do. These days lasted until Allison was 10 years old, when she witnessed her protective mother being kicked to the ground by her father during a Spartan, ordinary domestic violence. Stimulated by the sudden outburst of her magic, all of her pent-up anger was unleashed, resulting in a spectacular explosion. Her mother died in the blast, and her father was badly injured. A pair of aurors rushed to the scene and described the incident as a magical accident, rewriting the memories of everyone in the neighborhood, including her father, who believed it to be a tragedy caused by a leak in a gas line. Allison, who was young at the time, was no exception and forgot all about the incident. However, as she grew older and began to study magic at Durmstrang, similar scenes began to haunt her nightmares like nightmares. Now, with Grindelwald's help, she fully recalled that her mother's death was not caused by a gas leak, but by her own hand, and that she was the cause of her father's drinking and gambling habits. Allison was close to breaking down when Grindelwald spoke again.
You haven't done anything wrong, Allison. It's the ignorance of muggles who started it all. They don't understand the power of magic, and wizards are a wild myth to them, which is why your parents mistakenly attributed your gift to the devil.
Grindelwald raised his voice.
Just think, if your parents knew enough about wizards to appreciate the wonders of magic, they wouldn't be so stupid.
On the contrary, they will be proud to have produced a witch, as you were born with magical powers far superior to those of the average muggle child.
So you've done nothing wrong. What's wrong is the corrupt system of the wizarding world, the high and mighty officials who only know how to scheme and plunder.
They are the ones who drove you to your doom and created this tragedy, and they are the ones who kept wizards locked up in cages, cut off from the rest of the world, so that muggles would not be able to truly understand the power of magic. All we have to do is turn it around, so that more people will not suffer the same fate as you did.
Grindelwald said, enunciating each word.
Allison's dull eyes lit up again. Grindelwald's every word was exactly what she had hoped for from the bottom of her heart. It was not her choice to have magical talent, let alone a fault.
It's time for you to make your choice, Allison.
Grindelwald said coldly.
You may choose to continue the ritual and witness a new step in the wizarding world.
Don't let his words get to you, witch. The wizarding world isn't as bad as he claims. Most muggles don't mean any harm to wizards, either. You just happen to run into a horrible father who hates magic.
Farrell said anxiously.
Now that you've been to wizarding school, you should know that many muggle parents are happy for their children to be wizards. And then there are the aurors, who erase your memories without malice, presumably trying to protect you.
Allison interrupted before Farrell could finish, glaring at him angrily.
If those aurors were really willing to protect me, why didn't they show up when I revealed my talent and was falsely accused of being possessed by a demon? Where were they when I was abused?
Farrell opened his mouth to explain, then stopped himself. He didn't know much about Northern Europe, but even in the Americas, MACUSA couldn't spare enough manpower to keep track of every minor wizard's survival, let alone get involved in family disputes. Farrell's silence made up Allison's mind. Resolutely, she swung her wand and cut off her left hand, sending a wave of pain through her body that caused her to cry out in pain. Her fallen arm quickly sank into the cauldron, turning the previously murky liquid a brilliant fiery red.
Mad!
Farrell exclaimed, his skin crawling. If he wasn't mistaken, this witch, Allison, was a witch who had been bewitched by Grindelwald after he escaped from prison. In just a few days, she had completely submitted and voluntarily cut off her arm in order to complete this dark ritual.
You're very brave, Allison. Go on just one more step.
Grindelwald said appreciatively, not at all surprised by her choice. From the moment he saw the witch's heart, he knew that with a little guidance, she would become his most loyal believer. Allison clutched her broken arm and gasped in pain, but she managed to get to Farrell and wave her wand. Farrell instinctively closed his eyes. He was prepared to die, but to his surprise, Allison did not kill him. Instead, she used her wand to cut open his face and draw some of his blood into the cauldron.
The bones of the father, the flesh of the servant, the blood of the enemy.
Chapter 891, Creating a New Era.
You did well, Allison.
Grindelwald exclaimed, striding over to the witch and placing his wand against her broken arm. There was a flash of intense white light, and Allison's trembling stopped. The excruciating pain was gone, replaced by a tingling, soothing sensation. When the white light dissipated completely, Allison was amazed to find that her broken left hand had regrown and was now stronger than ever.
Thank you, Mr. Grindelwald.
Allison said happily, touching her new left arm. Grindelwald had assured her that he would reattach her broken arm, but she had heard about the magic of limb regeneration, so she was worried.
No, I'm the one who needs to thank you, Allison.
Grindelwald said, his lips curling into a smile as he reached out to caress the witch's cheek.
Your bravery took me by surprise.
Allison's face turned bright red. Grindelwald's words seemed to have some kind of magical power. It was just an ordinary compliment, but it was enough to stir her up and excite her. When the other party's slender fingers brushed past her neck, Allison felt her entire body tremble. Then, something cold hung from her chest. Allison looked down and saw a triangular pendant. The interior of the pendant was a circle with a vertical line in the middle. At first glance, it looked like a strange, split eye.
This is the real prize.
Grindelwald said.
You have my permission to wear it.
Having witnessed the resurrection ritual, Allison understood that the locket contained part of Grindelwald's soul, and that to carry it with her was to be in Grindelwald's company at all times.
I promise you I'll keep it safe, even if it costs me my life.
Allison said fervently, clutching the locket tightly. Grindelwald nodded, then turned to the wizard tied to the pillar and said casually.
Any last words, Farrell? You're not going to get away with this, Grindelwald. 50 years ago, we crushed your plans, and this time will be no different.
Farrell snapped, his heart sinking. When he saw Grindelwald reborn from the flames, he knew he was doomed. However, he would never allow himself to die so pointlessly. He had to find a way to get the information about Grindelwald's resurrection and the creation of a Horcrux to the North American Magical Congress.
I can't believe you're still so naive after 50 years, Farrell. I thought you'd remember not to try to make these underhand tactics in front of me.
Grindelwald's strange eyes glowed a ghostly blue. Farrell's face fell as he recalled that Grindelwald's file contained information that had not been conclusively verified. That Grindelwald, who was skilled in the dark arts, was most likely an accomplished legilimencer.
Come on, Allison, let's go create a new world.
Grindelwald said slowly as he lowered his wand. Unexpected in 5 of his 9 compulsory subjects, and in perfect in his defense against the dark arts exams. Ron, on the other hand, was much more miserable. Even after a week of intense revision, he only got 4 E's unexpected, and none of them were perfect. The only hope of getting an O perfect care of magical creatures exam was a passing grade, due to a mix-up with the Strals and hippogriffs. Despite Hagrid's best efforts as a professor, he was unable to change the invigilator's mind.
I'm glad they all passed.
Ron muttered to himself as he stared at the report card, relieved to see that the most difficult divination subject had passed. As long as he didn't have to compete with straight-A students like Ivan and Hermione, his grades were acceptable, being above average among the 5th years. Yvonne shook her head at the easy satisfaction of seeing Harry and Ron. The wizarding world was unpredictable over the next few years, and being able to protect oneself was not enough.
Take this summer off. You won't have such an easy time next year.
Ivan said, patting them on the shoulder. Chapter 892, Cohabitation and School Year Summary. Ivan made no attempt to explain further, instead addressing the group.
Hermione, Harry, and Ron, when you return this summer, you must be careful. Grindelwald may have left England, but there is no guarantee he will not return.
Are you worried he'll try to harm us?
Hermione asked. Yvonne nodded apologetically.
It's possible. After all, I'm afraid I'm the only wizard in the wizarding world who could possibly stand up to him, and you're all my friends, so you might be involved.
Grindelwald might not have let us go even without you,
said Ron, shaking his head.
My dad says he tried to enslave all muggles and wizards over 50 years ago, that he was a dark lord worse than Voldemort, and that it was Professor Dumbledore who stopped him.
When Ron mentioned Dumbledore, the atmosphere turned chilly, and even though the headmaster's funeral was over a month ago, Hermione and the others still found it hard to accept. Ivan, the instigator, rubbed his nose in embarrassment, as Dumbledore had technically died in a duel with him. Thinking of this, Ivan quickly avoided the topic and asked about their plans for the summer.
I'm moving in with Sirius tomorrow, and Ron and Professor Lupin will be staying with us for a while, so it should be safe.
Harry said excitedly. Now that Lord Voldemort was dead, there was no longer any need for him to stay at the Dursleys' house, and he could live with Sirius without fear.
That's nice.
Ivan said with a smile. If he was not mistaken, the Black family home was still the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix, and the Fidelius charm had been placed on it. Even after Dumbledore the Secret Keeper's death, the magic did not die out completely, although the risk of exposure increased as more people became aware of it.
What about you, Hermione?
Ivan asked, turning to look at the witch with concern. Hermione's safety had always been a major concern to him. Even though the Ministry of Magic had sent a number of Aurors to keep watch over Mr. and Mrs. Granger's house, Ivan was still worried. Grindelwald's strength was extraordinary. If the enemy launched a surprise attack, the Aurors would not even have time to react. By the same token, his magical mark could not guarantee Hermione's safety, as he had taught Ivan the last time Voldemort abducted Harry.
Surely Grindelwald wouldn't go so far as to go to the Muggle world and arrest people.
Hermione said hesitantly.
You never know.
Ivan said grimly.
Even 1% of the time, you have to be on your guard.
There was no medicine for regret in the real world, and Ivan didn't know what to do if Grindelwald decided to use Hermione as a threat.
Why don't you ask your parents to move in with me over the summer, Hermione?
Yvonne suggested after a moment. Hermione was so taken aback by Ivan's bold suggestion that she began to panic. She had thought about going to Ivan's house as a guest, but taking the whole family with her was not the same as going alone.
Is that too soon? These are special times, and you don't want your parents to be in danger all the time, do you, Hermione?
Yvonne asked earnestly. Hermione hesitated for a long moment, then said haltingly.
I can't.
Chapter 893, There's No Morality When Dealing with the Dark Lord. In the evening, the slow-moving Redskins train came to a halt with a clear whistle. Yvonne packed her bags and got off the train. Looking out at the bustling wizard station, she couldn't help but sigh, wondering how long this peace would last.
I'll see you next year then, Harry, Ron.
Ivan said, turning to face them.
You too, watch your back, Ivan.
Harry replied casually, his eyes wandering to the outer ring of the platform, where Sirius was waving at him. For the first time in 5 years, he felt happy to be home. Ron, on the other hand, simply patted Ivan on the shoulder in farewell and left with George and Fred to find Mrs. Weasley. After they had left, Ivan looked at Hermione and then at Mr. Granger, who was pushing his way through the crowd outside the platform.
Shall I explain to Mr. Granger, Hermione?
No need, I can handle it myself.
The little witch blushed and shook her head.
Then I'll wait for you for 3 days. If you don't reply, I'll have to come to you.
Ivan said with a smile. Hermione rolled her eyes at him. 3 days was too short a time, and she had hoped to spend at least a week testing her parents before trying to convince them otherwise.
3 days at the most. In fact, for security reasons, you'd better convince them tonight.
Ivan said grimly. Hermione hesitated for a moment, then replied in a soft voice.
Well, where shall we find you then? Knockturn Alley.
No, it's in London. I've bought a new mansion here, and I'll write to you tonight with the location.
Ivan began. Now that Lord Voldemort was dead, Ivan had no reason to hide, and more importantly, he was too embarrassed to allow Hermione and her family to live in the dark bunker on Knockturn Alley, so he had asked Topples to find him a suitable home in England a few days ago.
That's settled then.
Hermione gave Ivan a reluctant hug, then ran to Mr. Granger, whispered something in his ear, and dragged him out by the arm, not giving him a chance to see her, for fear that Ivan would say something ridiculous to his father. Yvonne watched Hermione hurry off with Mr. Granger and shook her head in amusement. Even if they didn't meet now, they would have to in a few days. During the delay, most of the young wizards stranded at Kingdom Cross Station were picked up by their parents, and the crowd had thinned considerably. Ivan looked around and soon spotted a familiar figure in the crowd. After nodding at the figure, Ivan straightened his wizard robes, grabbed his suitcase, and headed for the gates of Kingdom Cross Station. The figure quickly followed suit.
Have you heard from Grindelwald?
Ivan asked abruptly as they left the station and walked down an alley.
Not.
Chapter 894, Elixir of Immortality 1.
You've been doing well, Pierce.
Yvonne said admiringly, turning to him. His appointment of Pierce to the post of Minister for Magic had been an expedient measure, but the minister had done a good job. Most importantly, he knew his place, unlike Fudge, who could not see the bigger picture.
I was only acting on your orders.
Pierce said, trying to please her. He did not seem to want to take credit for her actions. He was humble, like a house servant rather than a minister for magic. In fact, the truth was not far from the truth. Pierce was well aware that his position as Minister for Magic was an empty one. The main fighting force of Britain was in the hands of Doggett and the werewolf, Flun. These people did not listen to their minister at all, and any order he issued had to be approved by Ivan Howells. To put it crudely, he was a mascot with a rubber stamp, and it didn't matter if the ministry had him or not. As the de facto ruler of the British wizarding community, Pierce could not help but resent the fact that he was living such a miserable life. However, after witnessing Ivan Howells's cruelty, he wisely discarded all those unrealistic thoughts. The body of the former Minister Fudge had only been laid to rest 6 months ago, and Pierce did not want to be the next Minister for Magic to die tragically. Ivan was pleased with Pierce's subservient attitude, but he understood that constant repression could lead to reverse psychology, and it was important to give his subordinates the right amount of sweetness, as it helped to motivate them.
So, what's your reward?
Ivan asked. Pierce was taken aback at first, but when he saw that Yvonne didn't seem to be joking, he considered the matter carefully. A direct refusal was out of the question, as it would be an affront to the other party. However, given his current status, he did not seem to have anything that he needed in particular. A large amount of galleons? Not bad, but from what he knew of Ivan Harris, he was known to be a money grubber. Retract some of the power that a minister for magic should have. Pierce decided it would be best not to court death. Seeing that Pierce was deep in thought for a long time and could not give an answer, Ivan impatiently took out a bottle of potion and said,
How about?
Pierce took the potion bottle from him and glanced down at it curiously, his eyes drawn to the emerald green liquid inside.
Why don't you just drink it and find out?
Yvonne said slowly, not bothering to explain. Pierce hesitated for a moment, then readily unscrewed the stopper and gulped it down in front of Ivan. He was not worried about the potion, as Ivan would not have to go to so much trouble to get to him. The potion tasted surprisingly good, and to Pierce's surprise, a warm feeling rose from his stomach and spread throughout his body. His body felt as if it had been soaked in warm water. The mental exhaustion from staying up all night for so many days was swept away. It was so comfortable that Pierce could not help but moan. What exactly was this potion? Could it be a powerful energy potion? Pierce was very curious. After drinking this bottle of potion, he felt as if he had regained his youth.
Congratulations on being 5 years younger, Minister Pierce.
Ivan said with a smile, patting Pierce's shoulder as he studied his face. 5 years younger. Pierce looked confused, then his body shook slightly. Suddenly, as if he had thought of something, he waved his wand and conjured a round mirror to look at his face. He said in a trembling voice.
This is.
Ivan nodded, confirming Pierce's suspicions. Possessing both the Philosopher's Stone and the legacy of Nicholas Flamel, he was naturally able to brew the legendary elixir of life. Although he was far from reaching the age where he needed to take medicine to extend his lifespan, this thing was a perfect bargaining chip for him.
This is unbelievable.
Unaware that he was being used as a lab rat, Pierce looked at himself in the mirror, unable to contain his excitement. He was in his mid-50s, and although he was still considered middle-aged among the 100-year-old wizard community, he was no longer as energetic as he used to be. He had been pampered for many years and had suffered from a number of ailments, which had greatly affected his quality of life. Now that he was several years younger, how could he not be excited? Pierce looked at Ivan with a new intensity in his eyes. If his earlier deference to Ivan had been due to genuine fear of him, it was now replaced by a desire for him. After all, no one could resist the prospect of living longer than they had to. Ivan watched Pierce's every move and knew exactly what he was thinking, but he deliberately did not mention anything about the elixir of life. Instead, he asked,
Have you found my London residence?
Pierce nodded quickly and forced the thoughts from his mind as he led Ivan through several streets before stopping at a remote location.
This is it.
Pierce pointed to an empty patch of grass and waved his wand to dispel the concealment spell. The next moment, an imposing manor appeared in front of Ivan. At the entrance was a silver gate large enough to hold 4 cars side by side, guarded by 2 statues of knights, and surrounded by a long green hedge that ran for hundreds of yards. Through a gap in the railings, Yvonne could even see a garden of its own.
How big is this place?
Yvonne asked, looking around.
It's not that big, maybe a dozen acres, but this manor is one of the legacy of those pureblood families.
Pierce said with a smile, knowing Ivan's needs.
Good, this is it.
Chapter 895, The Granger Family. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye, and Ivan, who had moved into the new manor, soon realized the disadvantage of owning a large house. If nothing else, it was a 10-minute walk from his room to the dining room, and Ivan sometimes mistakenly believed he was still in Hogwarts Castle. There were, of course, great advantages to having a large place. It meant that, in addition to his usual living quarters, he could renovate a dedicated library, training ground, potion room, and alchemy room. Ivan even expanded the top floor of the castle into a meeting room large enough to hold 1,000 people, in anticipation of an emergency meeting. Although the underground fortress in Knockoff Alley also had these amenities, who would want to stay in that dark bunker when they could enjoy the sunshine and gardens? However, the massive transformation was not something that could be completed in a day or two. Even with the help of a dozen engineers, Pierce only managed to complete half of the transformation in 3 days. In addition to the expansion of the project and the installation of defensive enchantments, and considering that Hermione's parents were Muggles, Ivan also went out to purchase some common electrical supplies, which saved him a lot of trouble as he was in London, where the houses were wired. When everything was ready, Hermione arrived later than Yvonne had expected, and it was not until the morning of the 3rd day that Yvonne received an official reply from the little witch, informing her that the Granger family would be visiting the following evening.
Are you sure this is the right place, Hermione? We're not in the wrong place, are we?
On the evening of the 4th of July, Will Granger, carrying a large suitcase, stood in the corridor outside the manor and looked around, trying to find a normal place to live.
This must be it.
Hermione said, looking uncertain. She reached into her jacket pocket and took out the letter Ivan had sent her. Despite his daughter's confirmation, Mr. and Mrs. Granger were still suspicious, as the large manor house in front of them looked like the home of a hereditary nobleman, with 2 giant statues of knights standing in front of the door with spears in their hands.
I'll ring the bell.
As his father and the only male present, Will Granger straightened his clothes and summoned the courage to ring the bell. The next moment, there was a slight trembling noise above his head, which was accompanied by his wife's exclamation of surprise. Will Granger turned his head to look and was shocked to see that the 2 statues of the knight in front of the door were moving as if they were alive. Will Granger was shocked by the sudden appearance of the statues, but they did not attack him. Instead, they slowly put away their spears and opened the door. In less than a second, a young boy appeared in front of them.
Ivan.
Hermione exclaimed, breaking away from Ivan's hug when she realized that her parents were watching.
I've been waiting for you for days, Hermione.
Ivan said with a smile, then turned to look at Mr. and Mrs. Granger.
How do you do, Mr. and Mrs. Granger? Welcome to the Harles Manor. Oh, hello, Hals.
Will Granger was still reeling from the shock of seeing the living statue, but he politely shook Ivan's hand. Strictly speaking, it was not the first time they had met. In the past, during the holidays at Hogwarts, he would often see Ivan at Kingdom Cross Station, and they would even talk briefly, so it did not take long for them to get back together. after exchanging a few words with her future
Father-in-law.
and mother-in-law, Ivan snapped his fingers and levitated their luggage behind them, inviting them into the manor for dinner. On the way, Will Granger took note of the beautiful scenery of the manor, especially the fountain and the garden, and finally asked,
Are you a wizarding nobleman, Harles? Of course not.
Ivan replied earnestly, shaking his head.
To be precise, there are no noblemen in the British wizarding world today, only long-standing wizarding families, and I'm not a member of any of those pure-blood families. Then how did you come to be?
Will Granger was having trouble understanding this. Prior to his arrival, he had asked Hermione about Ivan's family background and learned that he was the son of a single parent whose father had died young and whose mother owned a wizarding shop. Hermione was equally baffled, but she soon realized what was going on and said,
It must have something to do with the stone, mustn't it?
Yes, that's right, that's it.
Ivan nodded against his will. He couldn't very well say that the manor was free and that it was a gift from the Minister for Magic.
What's a philosopher's stone?
Mrs. Granger asked in amazement.
It was the greatest alchemical creation of them all, and legend has it that the philosopher's stone could turn ordinary stones into real gold, and could make potions that could grant immortality.
Hermione went on and on about the Philosopher's Stone, noting that its creator, Nicholas Flamel, was Ivan's teacher. Mr. and Mrs. Granger looked at each other in disbelief. Turning gold into immortality sounded like something out of a fairy tale. In their minds, even magic couldn't do it, or the financial system would have been in chaos. Even if such magic did exist, it would not be mastered by an underage wizard.
Ivan was the most brilliant student Hogwarts ever had, and even Headmaster Dumbledore and Minister Pierce spoke highly of him.
Chapter 896, Ivan, I know more about muggles than muggles. Is this?
Dobby Winky.
Ivan shouted, looking around. A few moments later, a wrinkled house elf appeared in front of them.
What can I do for you, sir?
Asked Dobby, who was standing at attention, clad in a gaudy dress and clutching a dirty rag. Winky, who was standing next to it, looked weak and frightened as she looked at Ivan and said,
Winky is at your service, sir.
Ivan nodded at Winky, then turned to Dobby and asked,
Dobby, why is this fireplace here? Didn't I tell you to get it to the warehouse? Sir moved to a new home, and Dobby.
Dobby blinked and looked at Ivan eagerly, as if he were a child who had done something extraordinary and was awaiting praise. Winky, the house elf, was not so calm. She was holding the golden fireplace and banging her head against it.
Winky.
For a moment, Ivan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He quickly stopped Winky's self-torture and said,
I don't mean to blame you, Winky, but if you replace the fireplace with a gold one, what happens when it melts?
Dobby immediately patted his chest to show that he and Winky had set up a constant temperature spell in the fireplace so that nothing would go wrong. Ivan looked at Dobby, wanting to say something but stopped himself. Warmth magic was a small matter. The main thing was that such a large golden fireplace facing the door was a little too arrogant and did not fit his usual low-key style.
This fireplace couldn't be the one that was lost at Hogwarts Castle, could it?
Hermione suddenly remembered that a fireplace had mysteriously disappeared in the castle a few months ago, alarming Professor McGonagall, who had been unable to find it.
Ahem.
Under Hermione's strange gaze, Ivan cleared his throat awkwardly and explained.
I accidentally turned this into gold the other day, so I had to get rid of it.
Will Granger couldn't help himself. He walked up to the fireplace and ran his hand over it. When he was sure he wasn't hallucinating, he said,
It's amazing what magic can do. Hermione, can you turn a fireplace into gold?
Will Granger asked his daughter curiously. Yvonne did not wait for the witch's reply.
It usually takes a lot of skill to turn a stone into gold, but I'm sure Hermione would have learned sooner or later.
Hermione was glad that Ivan had spoken up for her, but she shook her head. She had read enough books on alchemy to know what a philosopher's stone represented. Of all the alchemists in the wizarding world before Ivan, only Nicholas Flamel was capable of creating something so amazing. After Hermione's explanation, Will Granger began to understand what it meant to make a philosopher's stone, which was much more difficult than winning a Nobel Prize, especially at Ivan's age. Understanding this, Will Granger began to worry for Hermione, who, despite her brilliance and intelligence, was far inferior to Ivan. Not to mention the other party's talent, just the pure gold fireplace in front of them and this unimaginably huge mansion were enough to deter ordinary people like them. Ivan was, of course, aware of the couple's reservations and felt rather frustrated. He had set the meeting place to be in order to bring out the best in them, but it seemed to have backfired.
It's getting late, why don't we go to dinner?
Ivan suggested. Will Granger nodded in agreement. With Ivan's guidance, they were soon seated at the long table in the dining room, where two house elves eagerly served the food they had prepared. Hermione's heart went out to Winky and Dobby as they busied themselves, but she didn't comment. She knew that the cause of liberating house elves could never be achieved overnight. Ivan was kind enough to the house elves, not only for their wages but also for their holidays. When faced with a table full of food, Will Granger found it difficult to relax at first, but after drinking some wine, his talkative nature returned. Ivan, as the host, naturally did not neglect his guests. From time to time, he told them interesting stories about the wizarding world, and even talked to Will Granger about the effects of the collapse of the Soviet Union on Muggle politics.
If I hadn't known better, I would have thought you were
said Will Granger, looking at Ivan in surprise. Over the years, when he accompanied his daughter to Diagon Alley, Will Granger came into contact with many wizards, many of whom were ancient, old-fashioned, and secretive. Ivan, however, was quite different, and Will Granger could not believe that a wizard knew more about the world of Muggles than he did.
The truth is, I've always thought that wizards just have one more rare magical talent than the average person. They're not all that different.
Chapter 897, Cohabitation. With Ivan's deliberate agreement, the dinner was a harmonious affair, and the group enjoyed themselves immensely. It was only when they were about to leave the table that Will Granger asked hesitantly.
By the way, Harles, yesterday Hermione told me that a dangerous prisoner named Grindelwald had escaped from that prison, and that he might have had some impact on our lives. Is that why you suggested Hermione move us? Prisoner is not an accurate description of Grindelwald. Think of him as a...
Ivan corrected Will Granger so that he would understand the urgency of the situation.
Is he really that good?
Mrs. Granger was surprised. As a Muggle born in London, she did not know Grindelwald well, but she knew the significance of the German head of state's representation.
Grindelwald has always wanted to start a war between wizards and ordinary people, and if he succeeds, the whole world could fall into chaos.
Explained Ivan.
As for whether he can do it, I think it's possible.
Mr. and Mrs. Granger looked at each other with worry in their eyes. When Hermione told them about Grindelwald, they dismissed him as a dangerous fugitive. They even considered asking the local police station to help the wizards catch Grindelwald as soon as possible so that their daughter would not be frightened. After Ivan's explanation, it became clear what a terror Grindelwald was.
Forgive the intrusion, but do you have a grudge against Grindelwald, Harles?
Will Granger asked after a long hesitation. Given that Grindelwald was not a British wizard and was so ambitious, it was reasonable to assume that he would not deliberately target them. Will Granger didn't think his daughter could have anything to do with such a character, either, so the problem must lie with the unusual wizard in front of him.
Not exactly a grudge, but I'm one of the very few wizards who could pose a threat to him, so Grindelwald would probably get to you in order to get to me. After all, Hermione is my best.
Ivan said apologetically, looking at the Wills. He was very understanding of Mr. and Mrs. Granger's concerns and put himself in their shoes, thinking that he would be furious if his life were in danger.
No, it's not just because of you, Ivan.
Hermione said firmly, turning back to her parents.
You would have supported me, wouldn't you?
Of course, we're willing to support you in doing anything right.
Will Granger nodded without hesitation. Madame Granger smiled and said encouragingly.
I'm sure you'll beat Grindelwald's.
Seeing their reactions, Ivan finally understood where the witch's excess sense of justice came from.
Sir, madam, you don't have to worry too much. I asked Hermione to invite you to stay for a while just in case Grindelwald doesn't want to hurt us.
Ivan assured them.
And as long as you stay in this room, I can guarantee your safety, even if Grindelwald tries to do something.
Will Granger looked at Ivan with some doubt. After all, Grindelwald was so powerful. How could Ivan protect them?
Talent in the field of magic is often more important than accumulation and hard work.
Ivan replied with a shrug, then clapped his hands again to reassure Will and the others. A heavy rumble sounded from all directions. Will Granger looked around. The suits of armor that had been leaning against the corner of the dining room like ornaments started to move, one by one. They strode forward, drawing their weapons and lined up like soldiers being inspected.
It's some sort of protection mechanism, and the Ministry of Magic sends orders to patrol the area.
Ivan explained. Will Granger was completely reassured. After a good dinner, Ivan took Hermione and the others on a tour of the estate to familiarize themselves with the surroundings. It was the first time Mr. and Mrs. Granger had visited a wizard's home, and they were curious about everything. In fact, prior to their arrival, they had fantasized about what a wizard's residence would be like. Perhaps it would be an ancient castle, where the sun would not shine and where there would be strange and moving portraits. Will Granger was even prepared for a boggart to suddenly float out from under his bed in the middle of the night, and Hermione said it was likely to be in a wizard's house.
This is your room. Hermione, yours is next door.
Ivan led them to the 5th floor, where he pointed to 2 adjoining rooms.
If anything happens tonight, just call Dobby and Winky, and they'll be right in front of you. It's been hard on you, Harles, and you should get some rest.
Chapter 898, Idea of a New Wand. The next morning, Ivan washed up and went straight to the drawing room as usual, only to find Hermione and her family sitting at the table. Winky and Dobby were placing bowls of sausages, toast, and grilled tomatoes on the table, but the plates in front of them were empty, and knives and forks were neatly placed to the side, presumably waiting for them.
How are you getting on?
Ivan asked as he pulled out a chair and sat down.
Of course, thanks to you. This is the first time I've ever lived in a house this size.
Will Granger teased. Beside her, Madame Granger nodded in agreement. Although she had only stayed for one night, the mansion's opulence was beyond her imagination. When she passed by downstairs, she even saw a freestanding swimming pool.
Well, you can talk later, but let's eat first.
Hermione urged, picking up her knife and fork.
You might as well make yourselves at home. You don't have to wait for me.
Ivan smiled and started eating his sandwich. Will Granger did not act immediately. Instead, he observed Ivan for a while to make sure that there were no so-called aristocratic rules at the table. As they ate, Will Granger acted like a curious baby, asking why the statues had moved last night and how the house elves had popped up in front of him.
That's enough.
Ivan snapped, stopping Winky and Dobby from howling, then waved his wand to restore the broken plate with a regeneration charm before turning to look at a bewildered Mrs. Granger and explaining.
House elves tend to regard housework as their most important task, and it's very shameful to allow anyone else to interfere.
That's how wizards make house elves into slaves.
Hermione said with a sniff of displeasure. Yvonne pretended not to hear, secretly urging Winky and Dobby to get out of there before the witch mentioned the Home Elf Liberation Front again.
Is there anything we can do to help, Harles?
Will Granger asked after a pause. He was afraid that they would have to live in the manor for the next few months, and he would feel uneasy if he did not do something about it.
No, that won't be necessary. I'm the one who got you into this mess, and I'll take it as an apology for letting you stay here for the past few days.
Ivan shook his head. Dobby and Winky would take care of everything on the estate, and he was going to do more than 2 muggles could help. Mr. and Mrs. Granger must have figured this out, as they accepted their status as rice bugs with frustration and resignation. Hermione volunteered to serve as Ivan's assistant during this time. Considering that this would give the trio more peace of mind, Ivan readily agreed and took the young witch to the alchemy lab on the 4th floor. Despite the fact that the manor had not yet been completely transformed due to the limitations of time, the alchemy rooms and training grounds were the exception, as they were built first. These days, Ivan took the time to move all the books in Knockturn Alley.
Are you going to study wands, Ivan?
Hermione asked as she entered the room and looked at the book on the table.
Something like that. I'm going to make a new wand.
Ivan replied smoothly.
What about your old one? Is it broken?
Hermione asked in amazement. Ivan shook his head, extracted the unicorn wand from the sleeve of his wizarding robe, and explained.
It's not damaged, it's just weak.
Chapter 899, The Making and Improvement of the Wand. A week later, in the alchemy room of the great manor house, Ivan threw aside a badly damaged piece of wand wood and said,
Bring me ebony, Hermione.
Hermione, who was reading a book, nodded and got up to get to work. She took out the ingredients one by one and placed them in Ivan's hands. Ivan concentrated on the task of trimming and grooving the wood of the wand, soaking it in the active liquid he had prepared, and working on the next batch of ingredients. It was not until half an hour later that Ivan removed the treated wand wood, pulled off a strand of hair, and carefully placed it in his wand. He then cut his finger and used his blood to fill the gap in the groove. Ivan breathed a sigh of relief when he was done. Crafting a wand was a difficult task, especially when it came to the fusion of the wood and core. If anything went wrong, everything would have been for nothing. Magical objects were different from ordinary objects. Once they were damaged, they could not be repaired simply by chanting a restoration charm. Unless one had a hallows like the Elder Wand to increase one's magical power, one would have to craft a new wand. Perhaps due to his inexperience and the complexity of his powers, Ivan had failed more than 10 times in a week. It was partly due to a mistake in the crafting process, and partly due to the mismatch between wand wood and core that resulted in wands that simply could not be used. Fortunately, the wand in front of him did not seem to have any messy problems. Ivan picked it up, pointed it at the practicing dummy, and waved it vigorously.
Split up.
A blinding beam of magic flew from the tip of the wand and struck the wooden dummy, shattering it into pieces. Ivan was pleased with its power. He had almost used a split charm to produce the same effect as an ordinary blasting charm, which was more powerful than his original unicorn wand. Magical item, unstable wand, ebony, wizard hair, 12 inches and a quarter long. Magic strong. Magic word circuit, increase in magic to some extent, increase in magic power. Compatibility, 100%. Explanation, this wand is an experimental product of the master alchemist Ivan Hars. While it is powerful, it also causes the wand's stability to plummet. No one knows when the wand will strike, perhaps in the intervals between spells. Unfortunately.
Was the wand successful, Ivan?
I wouldn't call it a success. I'd say it's accumulated experience.
Ivan replied with a smile, regaining his composure. Creating a wand comparable to a deathly hallows was no easy feat, and Ivan considered asking Ollivander, a wandmaker, for advice. After a long morning of hard work, the finished product was finally finished, and Ivan had no intention of continuing with it. A work-life balance was important.
By the way, Hermione, did you finish those books I gave you?
Ivan asked, glancing at the books on the table, suddenly remembering.
Not yet, not so soon.
The little witch sighed, looking frustrated. Alchemy was even more esoteric than she had imagined, and even though Ivan would give her lectures in his spare time, there were simply too many difficulties. Yvonne frowned, thinking no, then slapped herself on the head, turned and opened the drawer.
It's my fault. I forgot to give you something.
Bewildered, Hermione watched as Ivan retrieved a beautiful crown from his drawer and approached her.
This is Ravenclaw's diadem.
Hermione asked in amazement.
Of course, you've seen it before, haven't you?
Yvonne teased as she placed the diadem directly on Hermione's head, pushing back her fluffy brown hair. The touch of the cold iron on her forehead caused some discomfort to the little witch, but then she felt her mind suddenly clear, and many questions that she had not understood before were answered.
God, I feel like I'm getting smarter.
Hermione clutched her diadem, her surprised tone somehow endearing.
You haven't forgot the legend of the crown of Ravenclaw, have you?
Ivan asked with a smile.
Grow wisdom.
Hermione paused, immediately realizing this, and then asked curiously.
But didn't Ron wear one the other day?
That's why Ron was unlucky. I still hadn't found the spell to activate it that day.
Chapter 900, The Friendly Pierce.
Aren't you going to try it on?
Yvonne asked Hermione with a smile.
Of course.
The little witch was very excited as she picked up an alchemy book and perused it. As she relived the memory, the previously obscure words instantly became clear in her eyes, and her learning efficiency increased several times. When she reread some words, she gained many new understandings.
Very good, Hermione. It seems you have a gift. Congratulations on creating a true alchemical object. At this rate of learning, it won't be long before you're qualified as an alchemist.
Ivan glanced at the comments in the system column, then back at the little witch. It was considered crude by his standards, but considering that it was the work of a novice, it was impressive to have achieved such a feat. Her face lit up at Ivan's praise, and she seemed pleased that her days of hard work had not been in vain. Perhaps because she was competitive or simply curious, Hermione put the quill away and asked,
By the way, Ivan, how long did it take you to learn alchemy?
About a week, Yvonne thought hesitantly, but that was after spending thousands of GPA points on an academic genius experience card, which was several times more effective than the Ravenclaw Corona. Not wanting to dampen the young witch's enthusiasm, he said modestly,
It must have taken me a month at the time. You're much faster.
How can that be compared? I cheated to get here so fast.
Hermione touched the diadem on her head and shook her head helplessly. Judging from her recent experiences, Ravenclaw's diadem had tripled her learning efficiency, meaning that it would normally take her a month and a half to get started, and that was only after Ivan, a master alchemist, had set aside 2 or 3 hours a day to explain the steps to her. You're not the only one who cheated.
Take a break, Hermione. You've been reading all morning. Exhausting yourself will only delay your studies.
Ivan removed the diadem from the witch's head with a sigh. He believed himself to be a keen learner, but he was still a far cry from Hermione, and suspected that if he had not interfered, she would have stayed in her room for the whole summer reading.
Why don't we go for a walk?
Ivan suggested. Hermione put the book down and nodded hesitantly, but just as she was about to go back to her room to change, she saw Ivan turn his head towards the window.
What is it?
Hermione asked, surprised.
Someone's coming.
Ivan said, rubbing his chin.
Someone I know.
At the same time, in the spacious reception room on the first floor of the manor, Will Granger heard a knock on the door and instinctively got up to open it. Outside the door, a slightly plump man in a top hat appeared with a pleasant smile on his face.
And you are?
Will Granger asked hesitantly.
You can call me Pierce. I'm a friend of Mr. Harl's.
Pierce said with a smile. With his intelligence network, he naturally knew the identity of the muggle in front of him and did not dare to slight him.
Oh!
Will Granger stood in the doorway, unsure whether to let her in or not. This was not his home, and the wizarding world did not seem peaceful. Luckily, Will didn't have to think about it for too long, because a few seconds later there was the sound of footsteps on the stairs.
Minister.
Hermione called out in surprise when she saw him outside the door.
Oh, hello, Miss Granger.
Pierce replied politely. Hermione smiled at Pierce and addressed her bewildered parents.
This is Mr. Minister for Magic. Well, the muggle equivalent of the president.
Chapter 901, Thunderbird's Trace. Pierce smiled and exchanged pleasantries with them, then looked at Ivan, who was coming down the stairs, and said,
Mr. Hales, I have something important to discuss with you.
Given the presence of an outsider, Pierce did not use the honorific to avoid adding unnecessary trouble.
Is there a loose end to the matter we discussed last time?
Ivan asked bluntly. He could tell from Pierce's relaxed manner that it was not about Grindelwald but the Thunderbird.
Yes, since it's so important, I had to do it myself.
Pierce nodded, glancing casually at Hermione and the others.
Let's talk in the conference room.
Yvonne said, dismissing the Granger family. When he was out of sight of Hermione and the others, Pierce immediately became respectful and reported.
We've found the Thunderbird you asked me to find, and according to our information, it was found in a small town in France.
France, why there? I thought the Thunderbird's habitat was over in North America.
Yvonne asked, raising an eyebrow.
I heard he was smuggled in and something went wrong. A few days ago, there was a riot in that town, and the International Confederation of Wizards is investigating it. They gave us this information.
Pierce said casually.
Wait a minute.
Yvonne was incredulous. She had just humiliated the International Confederation of Wizards, and she would be lucky if they didn't hold a grudge against her. How could they be so kind as to give her information? Or had they finally come to their senses and decided to use this information to ease the tension between them?
Have you sent anyone to verify it?
Ivan asked Pierce cautiously.
I've had someone confirm that the weather in that town has been unusual lately, possibly due to the Thunderbird.
Pierce hesitated. In fact, he had sent his men to capture the creature and claim credit for their efforts. However, the Aurors had been camping in the town for several days and had not seen the Thunderbird. Ivan was not surprised to hear that the Thunderbird was a highly sensitive magical beast. Its ability to anticipate danger and its powerful magic made it difficult to capture. However, it was for this reason that he chose the Thunderbird as his next target.
In addition, our spies have discovered that the French side is under martial law for unknown reasons.
Pierce's face grew grave.
No wonder the International Confederation of Wizards gave us this information so easily.
Ivan sneered, rubbing his chin. These people were probably expecting him to run into Grindelwald. Pierce understood this, but the Confederation's plan was likely to fall through, as he had found a professional 2 days ago to search for traces of the Thunderbird. Ivan's response was unexpected.
No, I think I'll go see for myself.
Ivan said, waving his hand dismissively. He was also curious as to what Grindelwald was planning to do in France, and some information needed to be confirmed, such as whether Grindelwald had been reborn and freed from the dark arts, as he had hoped. The most important task, of course, was to capture the Thunderbird and complete the next Bloodline fusion, or Ivan would not have been so confident against Grindelwald with his Elder Wand.
If you're planning on going to the town yourself, you should try to go to a local hotel. The commissioner should be there by now, and I'm sure he'll be able to give you some help.
Pierce said hesitantly. He took a photo out of the wizard's pocket and handed it to Ivan. Yvonne took the photograph from him and looked down at it. It showed an outrageously young wizard, probably not even 20 years of age. He was very plainly dressed but very sharp and efficient.
His name is Rolf Scamander, and he's sort of an expert on magical creatures.
Pierce explained.
He seems young, but he knows a lot about them.
Scamander.
Yvonne found the name strangely familiar and had to rummage through her memory to remember it.
What's his relationship to Newt Scamander?
Rolf is the grandson of Newt Scamander.
Pierce shrugged, confident that a 19-year-old boy would find the Thunderbird. However, in order to complete the task assigned to him by Ivan, he had originally intended to simply invite Newt Scamander himself so as to be safe. Who would have thought that this fellow would take his son to Africa to find out more about the Sphinxian problem of reproduction? Fortunately, Rolf was very knowledgeable about the habits of magical creatures, and upon learning that their target was a prized Thunderbird, they volunteered to go on their way.
Interesting, I'll see him when we get there.
Ivan nodded, accepting Pierce's arrangement. Though he had learned a great deal about magical creatures over the years in his quest to find a suitable fusion target, he could never hope to match Rolf's knowledge of magical creatures, which was passed down through his family.
Okay, I'll make the arrangements. When do you plan to leave?
Pierce asked.
Tomorrow.
Ivan replied hesitantly. Ivan would have preferred to leave as soon as possible, but there were other things he needed to attend to before leaving England, such as setting up the Fidelius charm in the house so that it would not be stolen, and explaining to Hermione.
Fine, I'll have Rolf sent a message to the local hotel the day after tomorrow, shall I?
Said Pierce.
That's it.
Chapter 902, Memory Threads. After bidding Pierce farewell, Ivan had no intention of delaying. The next day, he set up the Fidelius charm in the mansion and instructed the Granger family to stay at the manor and not go out.
Are you leaving tomorrow, Yvonne? So soon?
Hermione asked reluctantly.
Well, it's urgent. It'll take a week or two. I should be back before school starts.
Yvonne said hesitantly. It would take at least 10 days or half a month to find the Thunderbird and find Grindelwald.
Well,
Hermione's lips curved as she dragged out the word, even though they had agreed to visit London together yesterday. However, the little witch understood that it must be something very important or extremely dangerous for Ivan to be so eager to do it, so she did not object. Instead, she stepped forward and gave Ivan a hug.
it's nothing dangerous.
Ivan tried to explain, but Hermione didn't seem to believe him, staring at him as if trying to read his mind. Ivan scratched his head and quickly changed the subject.
Oh, and I kept Ravenclaw's diadem in the bookcase in the alchemy room. You can wear it whenever you want. But remember,
Ivan warned as he tapped the witch on the forehead. Hermione pursed her lips and looked at Ivan unhappily. She did not stay up all night, she just occasionally fell asleep late reading.
Can I contact you through the seal if I come across something I don't understand while reading?
Hermione asked, suddenly realizing that although she and Ivan would have to be separated for a long time, they could still communicate.
of course, as long as there's nothing else, we can talk all day.
Ivan replied with a smile. The little witch's face turned red, and she made a noise as she tried to punch Ivan on the shoulder. Yvonne deftly evaded his touch, but the smile on her face faded, and she continued cautiously.
But if I happen to have something urgent to attend to, I might temporarily cut off the communication function.
The magical seal was useful, but it could also cause unnecessary trouble, so he would usually temporarily cut off communication in battle to avoid distraction.
As for your alchemical lessons,
Ivan placed his wand on his temple, and a moment later, a white mist was drawn into the glass bottles.
These are.
Hermione guessed, looking at the mist in the bottle in amazement. Ivan nodded.
yes, it's a memory of my time studying alchemy and creating alchemical objects. You can browse it in the pensive.
He dipped one of the memory threads into the pensive, indicating that the witch should try it. Hermione eagerly immersed her face in the pensive as instructed by Ivan, and after 3 minutes or so, she looked up at him again and said excitedly,
My God, how did you come up with this? To learn by passing memories. Did it work?
Yvonne asked curiously.
It's wonderful.
Hermione said, smiling. In the world of memory, she could clearly see every step of Ivan's magical creation, which was far better than simply reading the alchemy books. The most important thing was that memories could be accessed repeatedly, as if a tireless teacher were rehearsing them in front of her.
Hogwarts should have included that in their regular classes.
Hermione vowed so that she would not have to worry about missing out on important lessons.
It's not as simple as you think.
Ivan said, amused. It was only because of his close relationship with Hermione that he dared to do so, and even so, Ivan had a strange feeling when Hermione looked at his memories. After coming up with a study plan, Ivan took advantage of the last half of the day to show Hermione around London, relax, and then, early the next morning, travel alone to the Muggle airport to fly to France. Although he had used apparition to go to France several times when he was learning alchemy from Nicolas Flamel, they were all based on specific coordinates, which had now been erased. Fortunately, after all these years of development, Muggle transportation was very convenient, and the journey from England to its destination took little more than an hour. After obtaining a forged identity card through the Ministry of Magic, Ivan passed the verification process without incident and got on a plane to enjoy his Muggle experience. Leaving the airport, Ivan hailed a taxi to the mysterious seaside town. The driver, a bald man in his 40s, appeared to be quite wealthy, if a bit of a chatterbox, sharing his life experiences with Ivan the
College boy on a trip.
and complaining about the terrible weather.
It's been 2 weeks and there hasn't even been a day of sun. It's been raining every day and this damned weather.
Said the bald man angrily. His home was in this town, and if it rained for a few more days, he thought his furniture would rot. Ivan turned to look at the window. It was drizzling outside and dark clouds hung low in the sky. The whole town was shrouded in silence and gloom. If this went on for half a month, it would be problematic. No wonder the ministry's spies thought they would find traces of the Thunderbird. As Ivan pondered this, the taxi slowed to a halt in front of an out-of-the-way hotel. The place seemed to have seen better days. The signage was old, and the advertising stickers on the outside walls had fallen off.
If conditions permit, it would be best if you moved somewhere else. Security in this area has never been very good.
The balding driver cautioned hesitantly.
Thank you for your advice. I'll be careful.
Ivan said easily as he paid the driver and got out of the car. He thought this place was perfect for wizards, secluded and secluded.
Disobedient brat.
Chapter 903, This is Magic.
It's true, believe it or not, I saw a monster the size of a house 2 days ago while climbing a mountain. It had 3 pairs of wings and golden feathers. It's a pity I didn't bring my camera.
Ivan turned to see a muggle in a round hat sharing his strange experiences with friends. However, not many people believed his words. What era was it now? If there was really such a monster, would it be able to hide? It would have been captured by the army for display.
I can assure you that everything I say is true. It's been raining every day for the past few days, and it must have something to do with that monster.
The muggle with the round hat yelled, his face red.
Come on, Cole. There's nothing original about your story.
Scoffed a white woman next to him.
Last week there was talk of some magical wizards coming to the town and starting a fight in the alley with a club, and it turned out to be just a stunt by a couple of jugglers.
Ivan was amused by their argument and took a few more looks at the middle-aged muggle in the round hat, wondering if he should ask him about the Thunderbird. Ivan's brow furrowed as he focused on the 2 robed wizards. He could feel a surge of magic coming from them. The next moment, the white woman who was still talking about spinning tricks suddenly fell to the ground and the chair behind her disappeared.
Who did this?
The woman got up from the ground in exasperation and turned around angrily, thinking that the wicked person had sneaked over and whipped her seat off. However, there was no one behind her, let alone a chair.
Annie, your chair seems to have,
said the frightened muggle named Cole, who had just witnessed the chair under her butt disappear.
You're saying my chair disappeared on its own. Ridiculous.
Anne shouted in exasperation, but her voice was shaking, and she was beginning to wonder if she had stumbled across a supernatural event in broad daylight. Several muggles nearby were dubious, but another scream soon followed.
Snake!
A 2-meter-long green snake slithered out from under the table. It bent down and flicked its forked tongue as if it was going to bite someone. The small hostel was instantly in chaos. Only Ivan, sitting in a remote corner, could see that the 2 wizards were behind this. He could understand being teased and made fun of by a few muggles, but it would be too much if he actually intended to hurt someone.
Excellarmus, excluding your weapon. Petrificus, all petrified. Stupefy.
Magic, it's magic.
Chapter 904, Interrogation and the Necklace. Having dealt with the shouting muggles, the Auror leader quickly turned his attention to Ivan, examining him for a moment before questioning him.
Tell me your name and why you're here, wizard. Most people would not come to such a small, isolated town at such an unusual time.
The Aurors did not look pleased. They had managed to catch 2 rats and were hoping to catch a big one, but Ivan had barely entered the hotel when this happened. He even suspected that the wizard in front of him, who appeared to be no more than 17 or 18 years old, was one of the 2 wizards who had been working with him.
I think you're mistaken, sir, but I had nothing to do with the riot, except that these 2 wizards decided to tease the muggles at the hotel on the spur of the moment.
Ivan replied, not at all flustered.
If you don't believe me, you can question these people.
Ivan paused, suddenly remembering that the 2 had cast their spells very discreetly, and that questioning the muggles would not lead to anything, much less clear his name. Just then, the Auror, who had just finished casting the spell, recognized him and exclaimed,
Ivan, what are you doing here?
Ivan turned to look at the familiar voice. It belonged to a silver-haired witch with an attractive face.
Fleur.
Ivan was more or less surprised. He had not expected to meet an acquaintance so soon after arriving in France and under such extraordinary circumstances. Ivan was surprised, but he quickly recovered. He looked at the witch's uniform robes and smiled.
I haven't seen you for more than a year and you've become an Auror. Congratulations.
It's just an internship. I haven't even started yet.
Fleur said modestly with a shrug, her lips curling into a smile. More than a dozen students had applied for Aurors, but she was the only one who had been chosen. The Auror leader cleared his throat, interrupting their conversation. He looked at Fleur, who was chatting with the Auror for no apparent reason, and asked,
You know him, Madame de Lacquer. Could it be that you are Beauxbatons?
No, Yvonne was a student at Hogwarts in England, and we met during the Triwizard Tournament.
Fleur explained, then asked in amazement.
Captain Bruno, have you not read about Harles in the papers?
Bruno was surprised. He had certainly heard of the Triwizard Tournament last year. However, Beauxbatons lost the match badly, and the limelight was stolen by the two Hogwarts champions. Even the mainstream media were vague when reporting the match, implying that the Hogwarts champions were cheating.
If you're a student at Hogwarts, then what are you doing in France? And why are you in this small town?
Bruno asked, not letting his guard down despite the wizard's reputation.
If you've read any of the British papers, you'll know that I graduated from Hogwarts by leaps and bounds this year. As for why I'm here,
Ivan hesitated, then decided there was no point in hiding the truth.
let's just say that I'm interested in the study of magical creatures, so I volunteered to be Mr. Rolf's assistant. It's my credentials to study and capture Thunderbirds. Any questions, Mr. Bruno?
Ivan took out a few pamphlets from his suitcase and placed them on the table. He had not been smuggled in, but had been hired by the International Confederation of Wizards in all seriousness, even in the name of apprenticeship. Bruno eyed him suspiciously, then examined the papers to make sure they were authentic. He then asked Ivan a few questions about the Thunderbird's habits and habitats, and was relieved when Ivan answered him fluently. Ivan was equally relieved. He had no fear of these Aurors, but if they intended to make things difficult for him, it would be difficult. He could not possibly beat up these law enforcement officers over a small matter, right? This is France, not England. It would not be good if it caused a series of diplomatic problems.
Captain Bruno, excuse me, but are these two criminals on the run?
Ivan asked tentatively.
It's none of your business, brat.
Bruno said, eyeing Ivan warily for a long moment.
I'll give you another piece of advice. This town is not very safe these days. When you see a strange wizard, stay away and don't start trouble for no reason. Do you understand? I'll keep that in mind.
Chapter 905, Rolf Scamander 1. Despite her feelings, Ivan was not so bored as to reveal the truth to these muggles. Sometimes, knowing too much will only cause more trouble.
Hello, Mr. Scamander.
Ivan stood up and extended his right hand to greet him. He looked curiously at the 19-year-old wizard, who was different from any other wizard he had ever met in terms of appearance and temperament. Rolf was very fit, probably due to his years of living in the mountains and wilderness. His brown hair was unkempt, his skin was tanned a dark brown, and his pants and clothes were stained with clay.
Pleased to meet you, Mr. Harles.
Rolf shook Ivan's hand and sat down across from him.
I read about you in the European Times. It said you were the most talented wizard in Britain and that you defeated several Aurors during your exams.
Ivan said in a low-key manner. Rolf felt an inexplicable urge to comment but decided against it. He cleared his throat and asked,
If I may be so bold as to ask, why did you suddenly decide to become my assistant?
Rolf was puzzled by this. A talented wizard like Ivan should have applied for an Auror or a clerical job at the Ministry of Magic to get promoted after graduation. Why would he dream of coming to France to be his apprentice? Most importantly, he did not apply for support from the British or the International Confederation of Wizards, but Piers suddenly shoved an underage wizard in his face, much to Rolf's displeasure. The target Thunderbird was a particularly sensitive magical beast, and one had to be very careful when tracking or capturing it. Bringing along an amateur could be a bad idea. Ivan naturally saw Rolf's concern and immediately explained.
Monsieur Scamander, I have always been interested in all kinds of magical creatures and have learned a lot about them. When I heard that a Thunderbird had appeared in France, I applied to join the operation. Please forgive me for not asking your permission in advance.
Ivan paused, then reached into his right sleeve with his left hand and pulled out what looked like a black guinea pig with a duck beak. After being caught by Ivan, this magical creature was not afraid of strangers at all. Instead, it blinked its large black eyes and looked at him innocently.
Is this the test you were going to give me, Mr. Scamander?
Ivan asked teasingly, pulling on the tail of the
Black guinea pig.
Rolf looked at the niffler in Ivan's hand and suddenly felt very awkward. He sheepishly took the niffler and angrily flicked his index finger at Ivan's head.
Oh,
Ivan said, using this as an excuse to point at the large black guinea pig with the beak.
Sniff, Sniff, known as the Mud Fury, it is a magical creature that burrows the earth and collects treasures. It is partially magical, with a rank of 3x, and is native to Great Britain. It has a gentle nature and can detect the presence of gold coins or treasures from a distance. It also has an interspatial pouch on its chest, and its black fur is a perfect material for an extended backpack.
Ivan went on and on about Niffler's habits, habitats, abilities, and even the value of fur and blood. Under Ivan's good-natured gaze, Niffler, who was trying to get away with acting cute, shuddered and clung to Rolf's thumb with all four paws. Rolf stuck his nose in his breast pocket, speechless. Now you're scared, why didn't you do it before?
I bought a live lamb from a nearby village, and I'm going to put a special spice on its hide first thing in the morning and put it on a nearby hill. It's supposed to attract the Thunderbird's attention, so all we have to do is wait for it to finish its hunt and follow it to its lair.
Rolf explained.
Then why not just give it another powerful anesthetic and knock it out? Should that save you a lot of trouble?
Ivan asked, puzzled. Rolf shook his head, then turned to look out the window at the dark clouds.
It's not that easy.
He said grimly.
You'd have to be a hunted Thunderbird to fall for that.
In addition, I suspect that the Thunderbird was most likely injured and violently agitated, which would explain the strange weather over the past week. Chapter 905 Part 2, Rolf Scamander 2. Ivan had a sudden thought, and he remembered the two wizards he had just arrested.
Who do you think attacked the Thunderbird?
He asked.
I don't know, perhaps a group of immoral poachers. After all, an adult Thunderbird's carcass could sell for thousands of galleons on the black market. It's hard to say if others would not be tempted.
Rolf sighed wistfully. He had seen such things many times while traveling the world with his father, and some of the rare magical creatures had been nearly wiped out by these bastards. Ivan, however, disagreed with Rolf, who found it hard to believe that it was a coincidence that a Thunderbird had been brought to France and that Grindelwald's minions were in the area. However, if it had something to do with Grindelwald, it didn't make sense. Why would he go to the Thunderbird? He couldn't possibly collect the Thunderbird's blood and fuse it with his own, right? Ivan dismissed the idea as soon as it surfaced in his mind. Given Grindelwald's level of magic, he would not have had to wait until now if he wanted to improve his strength by merging his blood vessels. Unlike Ivan, Grindelwald could not rely on the system to solve multiple blood conflicts.
All in all, this mission is going to be very dangerous. Aside from the Thunderbird, we're likely to run into some poachers, so you'd better think twice while you're resting. This is going to be a real fight and no joke.
Rolf advised her sternly. Although he had read in the European Times that Ivan had defeated 3 Aurors, he concluded that it was all for show. After all, Ivan Hals looked too young. Even if he was very skilled in magic, he must be very inexperienced in combat. In a formal battle, it was not a matter of who could cast the most powerful spell, and the opponent was not stupid enough to wait until you were ready before dueling.
That won't be necessary, Mr. Scamander. I am capable of protecting myself and am prepared to fight.
Ivan said flatly, but there was a finality to his words that could not be denied.
Well, if you insist.
Rolf nodded but didn't try to convince her otherwise. He wanted to keep an eye on Ivan in case she was in danger. Having tentatively agreed on a plan to capture the Thunderbird, Ivan and Rolf booked 2 rooms at the hotel and began the preliminary preparations. Rolf made the special spices that attracted the Thunderbirds, while Ivan took over the brewing of the potion. This time, they had to stay in the wild for at least half a day. If they did not want to be bitten all over, they would need potions to ward off mosquitoes and conceal themselves. In anticipation of possible contingencies during the mission, Ivan had also prepared a copy of the improved Bloodline fusion potion in advance, so that all they needed to do was collect some Thunderbird blood for the Bloodline fusion ritual. The next morning, Ivan left the hotel with a brood potion, while Rolf was waiting for him with a small goat. Perhaps because of the confunding charm, the goat was very well behaved and followed Rolf without a leash.
The potion you wanted.
Ivan threw 2 bottles of potion at him. Rolf took the vial from her and sniffed it to make sure it was working. Sniffy, the size of a guinea pig, also came out of Rolf's breast pocket, yawning. It looked around in a daze as if it had sensed the scent of treasure. When it saw Ivan, it let out a shriek, then slithered back into the bag, leaving its tail and half its butt outside. Ivan rubbed his nose.
Am I that scary?
Rolf, not knowing whether to laugh or cry, stuffed the sniffer's exposed tail into his pocket and pulled Ivan away in a rented Muggle car, heading for the towering mountain forest on the west side of town.
I can't believe you can drive.
Yvonne said, surprised.
Sometimes using Muggle transport saves you a lot of unnecessary trouble.
Rolf explained with a shrug. Although a wizard's apparition was useful, it could only be used to teleport to places they had been before if they wanted to get their destination right. As they chatted, Rolf followed the trail halfway up the mountain and stopped at a relatively flat clearing.
I have placed a Muggle banishing spell at the foot of the mountain, so that no one will disturb us during this time.
Rolf explained as he opened the car door and pulled the goat out of the trunk. Yvonne tried to sniff it, but she couldn't smell anything. Probably only a Thunderbird would be able to tell.
Need a hand?
Yvonne asked, rolling up her sleeves.
Of course, it'll save us both a lot of time.
Rolf did not refuse Ivan's help in restraining the goat from moving. It took Rolf about 5 minutes to get it all sorted out, after which he waved his wand to remove the confunding charm. When the poor goat woke up and saw the 2 wizards glaring at it, it ran away and disappeared into the forest.
All we have to do now is follow it. Don't get too close and don't lose it. Just be patient and wait for the Thunderbird to show up.
Rolf gulped down the last 2 bottles of potion he had in his mouth, then crouched and twisted. Fluffy yellow hair quickly emerged from its body, and its nails became long and sharp. Soon, a strong leopard appeared halfway up the mountain. The niffler in his pocket also fell out, but the little fellow quickly climbed onto the leopard's head and grabbed onto the few hairs. Rolf took a moment to adjust to his transformed form, then turned to face them and asked,
How good is your stealth, Hulse?
However, when Rolf looked behind him, he was surprised to find that Ivan had disappeared. Just as he was wondering what had happened, a voice came from midair.
I think it's rather nice.
Chapter 906, The Thunderbird That Was Shot Down.
I didn't know you were an animagus.
Rolf exclaimed.
It's no big deal. You're the same, aren't you?
Ivan replied as he flapped his wings and landed on top of the leopard. How could that be the same? Rolf rolled his eyes. He'd had to go through a lot to train to become an animagus.
By the way, Hales, when the Thunderbirds show up later, remember to follow my orders. Do not act on your own. If you are unlucky enough to encounter those poachers, do not try to force your way in. I will decide whether or not to abandon this operation by judging their numbers and combat effectiveness.
Rolf reminded him sternly. Yvonne gave him a strange look, then nodded.
All right, you're a professional, so we'll do it your way.
After reaching an agreement, the eagle and the leopard fled into the forest. Due to the delay, the half-grown goat had long since disappeared. Even if Ivan had the advantage of high-altitude vision, he would not be able to find its tracks in this complicated forest. Fortunately, this did not pose a problem for the battle-hardened Rolf. He moved like a real leopard, crouching low and sniffing for prey as he moved quickly. Within a few minutes, he had located the goat. Rolf didn't move any further. Instead, he kept a fair distance between them, using his low growl to drive the creature toward the top of the hill where it would be easier for the Thunderbird to spot the goat. Ivan slowly followed, not daring to fly too high in case he became the Thunderbird's first target. The chase went on for over half an hour, and Rolf was able to accurately estimate the goat's stamina. By the time they reached the top of the hill, the goat had collapsed in exhaustion.
What do we do next?
Ivan asked as he slid from the air and looked at the poor, helpless goat that could only bleat.
We'll wait.
Rolf hissed, pulling on her claws to keep herself hidden in the thick shrubbery.
We'll need to compete in patience with the Thunderbird, and the plan will be half successful if we can just sit tight. Half? What's the other half?
Ivan was intrigued.
Luck, we had better pray that the Thunderbird does not succeed in its hunt, or it may choose to remain in its lair, and we will have wasted our time.
Rolf explained, his face calm. Over the years of his research and exploration of magical creatures, there have been instances where he made ample preparations in advance only to fail miserably and return empty-handed. Ivan nodded, equally aware of this, and landed on a low branch. In his spare time, Rolf was in a rare mood and whispered to Ivan about his thrilling adventures over the years, as well as his knowledge of wilderness survival. The wait went on longer than Ivan had expected, and they were out of sight from morning till midnight. The half-grown goat, on the other hand, seemed to have regained its vitality and was prancing about in the grass, occasionally looking down and nibbling at the grass. Ivan turned his head to look at Rolf, who was lying in the bushes, pretending to sleep. Seeing this, Ivan also turned over and hung upside down on a branch, closing his eyes to recuperate.
Don't move, the sheep won't get away. Now is not the time.
Rolf was awake long before the Thunderbird's arrival and, like Ivan, was keeping an eye on the goat and the Thunderbird, although he did not make a move, as he was well aware of the Thunderbird's hunting habits. As expected, not long after he spoke, a bolt of lightning suddenly surged out of the clouds and struck the goat in its path. The stunned lamb was so frightened that it staggered and fell to the ground, then lay there trembling and motionless. Ivan held his breath and looked up into the sky. Now that the prey had lost its fighting spirit, it was time for the hunter to make his entrance. A golden bird flew out of the dark clouds. It was as fast as a beam of light. With a few dives, it swooped down from the clouds, opened its sharp forepaws, and gently scooped up the half-grown goat. Ivan finally got a glimpse of the Thunderbird, which was the size of a Muggle car and covered in golden feathers. Most peculiar of all, it had 3 pairs of wings, the largest of which had a wingspan of over 5 meters. After the successful hunt, the Thunderbird seemed to have no intention of enjoying the food on the spot. It flapped its wings again and flew away.
After it,
Rolf shouted.
But remember, don't get too close. Our goal is to find its lair. Don't try to do anything rash.
Chapter 907, Flight Prohibition Formation. The Thunderbird was quick to react to the sudden attack, dodging it and letting out an angry cry as it flapped its golden wings and sent several thick bolts of lightning towards the creature. However, this sure-kill attack was ineffective and was easily neutralized by the invisible barrier that rose from the ground. The Thunderbird gazed down at the 5 wizards with its red-gold eyes, sensing a great threat from its leader. Almost instantly, the Thunderbird made its decision, abandoning its sheep and fleeing. Unfortunately, the attacker seemed to have come prepared. The anti-aircraft formation was instantly activated, and the Thunderbird seemed to have been hit hard. Its movements became sluggish, and it finally fell. Ivan watched anxiously, but as a flying creature, he was inevitably affected by the no-flight formation, and was forced to land on Rolf's back, allowing the leopard to carry him.
Damn it, how did the poachers move so fast?
Rolf cursed, running even faster to get there before they got to him. I'm afraid he's not a poacher.
Damn it, we were too slow.
Rolf transformed back into his human form, picked up a feather from the ground, and angrily punched the sandy soil. Ivan, on the other hand, was not surprised at all. Even a powerful Thunderbird would not be able to last long in front of that person, not to mention that the other party had made ample preparations.
Did you see the poachers in the sky? How many were there?
Rolf asked through gritted teeth.
There were 5 of them.
Ivan said succinctly. There's still a fight to be had, Rolf thought to himself. Although there were more of them, he and Ivan were not exposed and were still in the shadows. If he could sneak up on 1 or 2 of them and kill them, then the 2 sides could fight. Ivan immediately saw through Rolf's plan and threw cold water on it.
I saw Grindelwald among them.
With those heterochromia eyes,
What did you say?
Rolf gasped.
Green.
Ivan explained.
This is going to be difficult.
Rolf said, frowning. He had read about Grindelwald's escape from Nurmengard in the European times, but he had never expected to run into such a legendary dark wizard. He had heard his grandfather recount the events of over 50 years ago, so he knew exactly what the name Grindelwald meant.
Mr. Scamander, you'd better go back and tell the ministry to come. I'm afraid the fighting is going to be very dangerous, and I'm not entirely sure I can keep you safe.
Ivan's expression was very serious, and he did not seem to be joking. Haha, Rolf stared at Ivan in bewilderment. Isn't.
That's about enough, isn't it?
Chapter 908, Terrifying Thunderstorms and Space Nodes. At the same time, in a clearing in the depths of the forest, the two wizards were looking at their leader after setting up their protective spells.
Mr. Grindelwald, the circle you need is ready. Good, you've done well.
Grindelwald said appreciatively, stepping forward to pat them on the shoulder, then turned back to the captured Thunderbird. After being beaten up, the Thunderbird was no longer as arrogant as before. It looked very miserable, with a long wound extending from its chest to its left wing. Crimson blood kept seeping out of the wound, dyeing its tail feathers golden red. In order to prevent the Thunderbird from escaping, wizards used transfiguration to create several large chains that bound the Thunderbird tightly. Together with the weakening charm and the protective spells that were placed around it, the Thunderbird could barely move, let alone escape.
There's no time to lose.
Grindelwald said.
Get ready, we'll start now.
The four wizards looked at each other, then cast an armor charm on themselves and cautiously retreated to a far corner.
Go ahead and vent your anger. Show me what you've got.
Grindelwald gazed at the giant Thunderbird in front of him, gently waving his wand to remove the weakening charm he had placed on it. Regaining its ability to move, the Thunderbird glared venomously at Grindelwald, its golden eyes filled with rage. It raised its 6 wings high in the air and let out a piercing shriek. As its magic flowed, dozens of thick bolts of lightning fell from the sky. The flashes of lightning gathered together and created a violent thunderstorm, the shock waves sweeping out in all directions with a loud roar, the dangerous and swift lightning spreading like a spider web. The 4 well-prepared wizards were inevitably affected, and their shield charms shattered almost instantly under the force of nature. Fortunately, the protective spells that had been set up in advance worked. Strong magical barriers rose from the ground like 4 walls isolating the area from the thunderstorm. Seeing that the last of their defenses had not been breached, the wizards breathed a sigh of relief, then looked at the figure in the middle of the storm with concern and admiration. Grindelwald's body glowed with magical fluorescence, and as the lightning entered his body, it quickly fell silent. His cloak, which looked like it was made of silk, became even more magical, isolating him from the terrible heat caused by the thunderstorm. Grindelwald stood quietly in the middle of the thunderstorm, searching for the hidden spatial node. Under the influence of such a terrible thunderstorm, some deeply hidden traces of magic would be revealed.
Not hard enough.
Grindelwald said as his eyes flew open, and he pointed his elder wand at the Thunderbird.
Crucio heart-wrenching.
The Thunderbird cried out in pain as bolts of lightning fell from the dark clouds, triggering thunderclaps. The flickering arcs of lightning became more concentrated, and tiny cracks appeared on the otherwise solid barrier of magic. The 4 wizards hiding at the periphery felt their scalps go numb, and they subconsciously took a few steps back, praying that the magical barrier would stabilize. Grindelwald's lips curled into a smile. As the thunderstorm intensified, he could clearly feel the point of connection between the 2 spaces.
Stay here and make sure no one else comes in.
Grindelwald said without preamble as he strode into the dark passageway. He was going to the residence and burial ground of a master alchemist. There must be all kinds of dangerous magical traps inside, so there was no need to lose people for no reason. After Grindelwald's departure, the tunnel, which had been temporarily created and was unstable, slowly closed.
What is Grindelwald trying to do with such a terrible thunderstorm?
Ivan muttered to himself as he watched the lightning fall from the sky, in the dense forest hundreds of meters away. He didn't think the captured Thunderbird could have resisted Grindelwald so fiercely, so it had to be intentional. Or rather, the other party captured the Thunderbird to create this thunderstorm. Ivan thought to himself as he picked up speed again. With all the commotion up ahead, he didn't need to smell the blood in the air to know where the Thunderbird was. However, the closer he got, the more familiar the woods seemed to him. He seemed to have been here before.
I'll take 2 each. No need, just hide.
Ivan refused Rolf's help, leaping out of his hiding place as he spoke. The cheetah's speed was already astonishing, and with the enhancement of its magic, one could only see an afterimage. The nearest wizard did not even have time to react before he was sent flying.
Enemy attack, wizard.
Chapter 909, The Three Sacred Weapons.
Reducto crushing. Petrificus all petrified.
The other 2 wizards were not slow to react. They frantically pulled out their wands and pointed them at the cheetah that had suddenly appeared. Several magical beams of light instantly shot out. Ivan did not try to dodge the attacks. Instead, he spun and collapsed into a ball of fire, the beam of light passing through his body.
What kind of sorcery is this?
The wizards watching could not believe their eyes, but before they could understand what was happening, the ball of fire crashed into them. A violent explosion sounded in the forest, and the flames instantly sent the 3 of them flying. Then, as the flames began to gather, Ivan reappeared in the clearing. Rolf stepped out of his hiding place and looked at the mess on the floor. He silently put his wand back inside. He was beginning to believe that the headline in the European Daily News wasn't just a bluff. The man had probably actually defeated 3 elite Aurors when he graduated. Crackle,
You calm it.
Ivan said to Rolf, then strode over to the wizard he had slapped away and grabbed him by the collar, forcing him to look him in the eye. Telekinesis. The wizard had intended to resist, but he was dizzy from the claw on his head, and the moment his eyes met Ivan's, he was completely mesmerized. A flood of fragmented memories rushed into Ivan's mind. Ivan's face fell as he scanned through the last few months of memory. He now understood why Grindelwald had suddenly come to France. He was looking for Nicholas Flamel's house, or, to put it another way, he was after the Resurrection Stone. It was the last of the 3 Hallows, and Ivan had no idea what would happen if Grindelwald got his hands on it. Ivan, however, was more or less baffled as to how Grindelwald knew that the Resurrection Stone was in Nicholas Flamel's safe house, and how the location of the spatial node had been determined. It must be noted that Nicholas Flamel was extremely cautious in his decision to leave the 2 pieces of information behind so as not to be disturbed. Could it be Dumbledore? Ivan thought about it and decided it was unlikely. Dumbledore would never betray an old friend.
Did you find anything?
Rolf asked as he approached.
Grindelwald has entered the residence of the master alchemist, Nicholas Flamel. I must go and stop him.
Ivan exclaimed as he approached the spot in the wizard's memory where Grindelwald had been standing, closing his eyes to sense the remnants of magic in this space. Since the passageway had been opened only a few minutes earlier, and the method used had been brutal, the traces of magic that remained were clear, and Ivan could clearly sense that there was no need for Grindelwald to have made the necessary preparations. A moment later, Ivan opened his eyes and swiftly waved his wand, causing a dark spatial passageway to appear.
Are you just going to go in there? Howls! We know what he's after, so we'd better call the ministry and get them to deal with it.
Rolf said, trying to calm Ivan down. Ivan was more powerful than Rolf expected, but Grindelwald was a notorious Dark Lord, and the 2 of them would be sending themselves to their deaths.
It's too late for that.
Ivan said firmly.
Nicole Flamel was my teacher, and I'm not going to stand by and watch Grindelwald destroy his graveyard and his house.
If he had the intention of watching from the sidelines or running away if he couldn't win, now he had to stop them. In addition, Grindelwald had been in France for at least 2 months, and who knew if he had spies in the Ministry of Magic. Ivan didn't hesitate to step inside, and of course instructed Rolf to keep an eye on the unconscious dark wizards. Rolf waved his wand and conjured several ropes to tie up the dark wizards, but Niffler, who was lying on his shoulder, was pawing at the ropes and looking anxiously in the direction of the portal.
Do you think we should go help too?
Rolf murmured to himself, trying to calm her down. He was also worried about Ivan going after her alone, but he doubted he would be of much help.
Wait a minute.
Rolf suddenly turned to look at the Thunderbird that was tied up next to him. He had seen how terrifying the Thunderbird's thunderstorms were when they were in the forest. It was definitely a formidable force. Not to mention the Thunderbird's speed, which could carry them away in a crisis. After much consideration, Rolf swung his wand and broke the chain binding the Thunderbird. He had previously healed and comforted the Thunderbird, gaining its trust, so he was not worried that it would attack him.
I know you don't like wizards very much, but we're there to deal with the man who attacked you, and we need your help.
Chapter 910, Repeated Rooms. As soon as he stepped through the door, Ivan realized that something was wrong, as the interior of the room was completely different from what he had expected. It was a square room with only 3 doors in 3 directions apart from the walls. He had been in Nicholas Flamel's house for months and had never seen anything like it. Was it some sort of special defense mechanism? Yvonne thought about this in silence. Time was of the essence, however, and Ivan did not want to delay. After 10 seconds of observation, he tentatively opened the right door. There was a long corridor leading to another door, which Yvonne hurried through and opened, only to find another empty room. Ivan had a bad feeling about this, so he tried to open another door, and sure enough, there was a long, narrow corridor. After several minutes of trial and error, Ivan's frown deepened as he realized that he was in an endless loop of space, and no matter which door he opened, it made no difference. If it weren't for the annoying magical traps and guards in some of the rooms, Ivan would have wondered if he was back to square one. After barging around for a while, Ivan forced himself to calm down. No matter how anxious he was now, it would be useless.
What exactly is the pattern?
Yvonne asked, looking around the 30-square-meter room. She stared at the 4 doors for a long time, trying to find a clue, but they all looked the same. Could it be that there was no pattern at all, that everything was random, and that it all depended on luck to get out? Or could it be that Nicholas Flamel did not set up the so-called exit in order to not be disturbed after his death, and intended to exhaust the enemy in a room that kept repeating itself? Many thoughts flashed through Ivan's mind. If that was the case, then he would not be able to get out. There is, of course, a more extreme solution, which is to simply cast spells and blow up the rooms to see if they can find an exit. However, this would most likely lead to the collapse of the independent space created by Nicholas Flamel's magic, burying everything in it.
Every time I cast a spell, there will be traces of magic.
Ivan muttered to himself. He tried to close his eyes and sense his surroundings. The drifting magic gradually covered the entire room like tentacles. Using his magical senses, Ivan discovered that all the rooms were made of illusory magic and were connected to each other by some sort of power. Realizing this, Ivan then tried to enter the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th rooms and soon discovered their subtle differences, not in appearance but in magic. In layman's terms, the place he was in was like a huge maze, and the magic gave each room a different number. If he could figure out the order in which these numbers represented, he could find the exit. Realizing this, Ivan regrouped and explored the countless rooms and aisles. Due to her training in legilimency and occlumency, Ivan's memory was extraordinary, allowing her to remember every door she opened and create a 3-dimensional image of the maze in her mind. When Ivan opened the 42nd door, the living room finally came into view. Ivan, tortured to the point of collapse by the maze, slowly relaxed. However, at that moment, he felt a sudden sense of danger. The statue of the knight that was left with only half of its body on the ground slashed at him without warning. The heavy stone sword slashed across, so fast that Ivan only heard a piercing whistle before the sword was right in front of him, slicing him in half from the shoulder. However, the strange thing was that there was no blood flowing out of the cut. Ivan's separated body quickly collapsed into flames and gathered itself again.
Reducto, shattered to pieces.
Ivan, having escaped the attack, swung his wand backwards, and a brilliant beam of magic instantly blasted the statue to pieces. The magical guards that the master left behind were quite merciless.
Ivan howls.
Grindelwald said coolly, turning to look at Ivan as he approached.
I didn't expect you to be in France. Of course I'm here. Nicholas Flamel was my teacher, and this is his graveyard.
Chapter 911, The Mighty Grindelwald. Grindelwald didn't seem surprised by this. He tapped the wand in his hand and said slowly,
I didn't want to intrude, but it's a pity that your teacher took something that wasn't his.
Ivan turned slightly to look at the diamond-shaped crystal mounted on the wall, confirming Grindelwald's intentions.
I'm afraid the maker of the resurrection stone died a long time ago, and there is no such thing as a master. Since Headmaster Dumbledore chose to give the resurrection stone to Master Nicholas Flamel, he owned it.
Ivan added.
Deliver, I doubt it.
Grindelwald's face broke into a sardonic smile. Ivan was stunned for a moment, then looked at Grindelwald. To be precise, Dumbledore did not give the resurrection stone to Nicholas Flamel, but asked him to repair it. Could Grindelwald really have gotten this information from Dumbledore?
I do not intend to be your enemy, Howls.
Grindelwald said in a low, hoarse voice, stepping closer.
What power you and I have should be used where it counts.
Ivan asked with a sneer.
It would be more accurate to put someone more suitable in their place.
Grindelwald corrected himself.
It is only a matter of time before a conflict breaks out, and even if the wizards mean no harm, our very existence is a material threat to muggles.
Ivan remained silent. 2 or 3 words could not shake him. Grindelwald's expression was one of obvious regret.
It's a pity you chose the wrong path. Then, as it happens, this is probably the best place for your grave.
Ivan's patience had reached its limit, and as he spoke, he raised his wand and waved it vigorously.
Serpensortia, mistake.
Ivan didn't take Grindelwald lightly. The alchemical device on his right wrist lit up, and with the aid of a large amount of magic, a 90-foot-long serpent slithered out of the tip of the wand and lunged at Grindelwald with its mouth open. Grindelwald did not panic. He did not move. Wisps of dark blue fire appeared in front of him and condensed into a large fireball that entered the python's mouth. The next moment, there was a violent explosion, and the blast extinguished the torches that were burning around them. Even the sturdy stone base cracked. Half of the python's body exploded in a cloud of dust, and scarlet blood rained down. Suddenly, a white dot of light appeared in front of them. A moment later, it was right in front of them. An illusory white beast was stepping through the mist, its spiral horns glowing faintly.
If that's all you're capable of, then stay here today.
Grindelwald gently lifted his wand, and a large amount of dark blue fire surged out of the tip. In just a few seconds, it turned into a sea of fire that surged forward like a wave. Ivan's expression was grave as he quickly waved his wand, and a barrier of white flames rose out of thin air. The 2 different colored flames collided and melted and devoured each other, creating a heat wave that stripped away the stone tiles on the ground and shook the entire house. With the help of the Elder Wand, Grindelwald's fire was so fierce that Ivan was at a disadvantage for the first time in a match of fire, and could only continue to cast spells to maintain this protection. Scarlet dragon scales gradually appeared on Ivan's face, and the power of the technique was enhanced to a certain extent, but even so, the sea of blue fire was still advancing bit by bit. However, this did not seem to be Grindelwald's limit. 3 magical beams of light soon penetrated the flames and shot towards him. Ivan's face fell, and he managed to dodge the attack by turning into a ball of fire, but his heart sank. Grindelwald was probably more powerful than he had expected, and the only time he had ever felt so completely suppressed was during his last battle with Dumbledore.
Curse all!
Ivan retreated step by step, but his wand was pointed forward. An inexplicable power spread out in all directions with him at the center, suppressing the momentum of the blue sea of fire for a moment. However, Ivan was well aware that this was only a temporary measure. Under Grindelwald's control, the firebeaters formed a ring around him, clearly intending to block his escape. At that critical moment, a golden bird burst in, caught sight of Grindelwald in the flames, and let loose an angry shriek, sending several thick bolts of lightning towards him. Grindelwald, who had intended to besiege Ivan and kill him, was forced to stop and block the Thunderbird's attack. The moment Grindelwald was distracted, Ivan weakened his hold on Oblivion and poured most of his magic into his wand.
Disentium separating left and right.
Chapter 912, The Sixth Bloodline Fusion. Beep. The angry Thunderbird was not going to let this opportunity slip by. Lightning flashed on its tail, and in an instant, a powerful thunderstorm had gathered and struck Grindelwald into the bottomless abyss. Without Grindelwald to control it, the fierce fire's offensive slowed, and it was quickly suppressed by the effects of the ultimate curse.
Quick, over here!
Rolf called out urgently as he flew toward Ivan on his Thunderbird, his right hand outstretched. Ivan had the ability to do aerial combat, but he did not refuse Rolf's offer. He grabbed his hand and climbed onto the Thunderbird's broad back.
Thank you, Mr. Scamander.
Ivan said gratefully, patting Rolf on the shoulder.
Don't be such a stranger, call me Rolf.
Rolf laughed, pointing to the Thunderbird beneath him.
And I didn't do anything to deserve it. It's mostly his fault.
The Thunderbird let out two high-pitched cries, indicating its presence.
Well, thank you too, Sir Thunderbird.
Ivan said reluctantly. While they were chatting, most of the tiles on the second floor had collapsed, and the view downstairs was visible through the deep cracks. Rolf hoped desperately that Grindelwald would be smashed to death by the falling masonry, in which case they would be completely safe. Unfortunately, the falling bricks froze in midair before they could hit the ground, as if they had been grabbed by a giant hand. They quickly gathered together, and in just 3 or 4 seconds, a 9-meter-tall stone giant appeared in front of them.
Is Grindelwald's transfiguration that good?
Ivan's expression was grave. He knew Grindelwald was highly skilled in the dark arts, but he did not expect Grindelwald to be equally frighteningly skilled in transfiguration.
This is not the time to be thinking about that.
Rolf shouted, his scalp going numb as the stone giant swung its palms at him.
Obstacles!
Rolf shouted through gritted teeth, and a barrier of magic appeared, but it was as thin as paper in the face of the rock giant, and it tore apart in less than a second. The Thunderbird's body sparked with electricity, and its speed increased again, narrowly missing the giant hand. Rolf lay on the Thunderbird's back, feeling the wind rush over his head as he experienced what it was like to die.
Do something, Hulse!
Rolf said urgently. His tentative defense had taught him that Grindelwald was more than he could handle. The difference between them was like the difference between a sniffle and a dragon. The only person he could rely on was this wizard, who was several years younger than him.
I'm thinking.
Ivan snapped, glaring at Rolf. After much hesitation, he decided to take the gamble, otherwise the resurrection stone would fall into Grindelwald's hands.
Are you all right, Harls?
Rolf asked eagerly. He had assumed that Ivan was trying to brew a potion like Felix Felicis, and only good luck had helped them escape. However, Ivan looked like he was about to explode as soon as he finished it, and Rolf even began to suspect that Ivan was in too much of a hurry to get the wrong potion. Ivan didn't reply. He focused all his attention on controlling the magic riot, and the protective mode was activated the moment he drank the potion. However, the conflict between the 6 bloodlines was too intense, and he was unable to suppress it immediately. By the time Ivan managed to calm the first wave of magic, the eerie blue flames were right in front of him.
It's over.
Rolf said with a bitter sigh. He had once caught a terrifying runespore, slept in a dragon's den, and escaped death's clutches several times. This time, however, he would not be able to. Ivan suddenly rose from the Thunderbird's back and faced the sea of fire, his expression unchanged as he raised his wand and said,
It's not over yet. The battle has only just begun. Wind!
The moment Ivan opened his mouth, a violent gust of wind appeared out of thin air in the room, which was only a few hundred square meters in size. It kept the sea of fire at bay and even swept towards its original owner. Grindelwald's calm expression finally changed. He waved his wand and conjured a huge golden shield, and the giant rock giant retreated.
Separate left and right.
Chapter 913, Deathly Hallows Resurrection Stone. It was only when the cloak of invisibility was in the enemy's possession that Ivan realized how tricky it was. However, there was one thing that puzzled him. When Harry had the cloak of invisibility, it was concealed by simply putting it on, and Grindelwald seemed to have complete control over it.
Ray!
Ivan turned his head and quickly waved his wand. A bolt of blue lightning formed at the tip of the wand and struck to the right. The lightning was incredibly fast, and Grindelwald had just raised his wand to cast a spell when it struck him. Grindelwald's face fell. He had not expected his captor to have the ability to see through the cloak of invisibility. Fortunately, the cloak of invisibility protected him from most of the lightning's power, and even so, he was able to feel the numbness of the current as it ran through his body. Ivan was relentless and 100% confident in his ability to sense danger. He flicked his wand and several invisible blades of magic flew out. Grindelwald flicked his wand, and a large amount of debris gathered together to form a solid barrier of rock, barely holding off Ivan's attack. Rolf watched Ivan fight an invisible man. Unable to help, he grabbed the Thunderbird's back to prevent himself from falling out of the sky.
Wait! Is this place going to collapse?
Rolf asked, looking around anxiously. He would have been hit by a falling rock if the Thunderbird hadn't reacted so quickly, and Ivan's reply made his heart sink.
No, it could be worse.
Ivan glanced at the crack in the wall, which revealed not a courtyard but dark, deep space turbulence, evidence that it was not the room that had shattered, but a separate dimension created by Nicola's Flamel.
What are we going to do? Call a truce?
Rolf asked anxiously, apparently aware of the situation. He'd already tried using apparition in this isolated space, and he was certain they'd die if the entire place got caught in the turbulence. Ivan did not reply. Even if they tried to leave now, Grindelwald would not allow it. He would not sit idly by while Grindelwald left either should a breach be made and a storm of attacks follow.
Crack. Sniffle fly.
Chapter 914, The Coffin Flying in the Sky.
Creak.
The Sniffy was forced to let out an ugly shriek. Under the combined pull of the two magical forces, its body flew up and down like a leaf, but its forepaws still clung tightly to the resurrection stone. As the stalemate continued, Rolf plucked up the courage to point his wand at Grindelwald and shout.
Expelliarmus, miss.
A scarlet beam flashed across the gloomy room.
Well done, Niffler, you've done a good job.
Ivan said happily, but he was not slow. He snatched the resurrection stone from Niffler's paw and stuffed it into his pocket. The Niffler, which was glad that it had escaped, was stunned. It had not even warmed the treasure that it had gone through so much trouble to obtain, and it was gone just like that. Before it could protest, however, it was thrown back to Rolf by Ivan, who turned on it faster than the pages of a book.
Over there, Thunderbird.
Ivan did not hesitate. After securing the resurrection stone, he directed the Thunderbird toward the couple's coffin. Grindelwald was not going to let Ivan get his hands on the resurrection stone. He furiously waved his wand, and the scattered blue flames on the ground immediately gathered and shot towards Ivan like fireballs.
Wind!
Ivan shook his wand, and a violent storm swept through the room, causing the fireballs to explode. The house, already on the verge of collapse, collapsed in on itself with a deafening explosion, and a deep darkness began to seep into the house from outside. Ivan and Rolf both felt a sense of impending doom.
Now how do we get out of here?
Rolf asked grimly.
We wait.
Ivan said slowly. Wait for what? Rolf was very confused. If he waited any longer, this space would collapse completely. Ivan focused his senses and looked at the two collapsed coffins in front of him. He waved his wand and used magic to lift them up. The deep gloom had spread to their sides, and they could hear the faint rumble of space breaking.
Now get ready.
Ivan shouted.
Ready for what?
Rolf asked eagerly.
Run!
Ivan shouted as he burst into white flames that engulfed Rolf, the Thunderbird, and the two coffins.
Don't resist, I'll get you out.
Rolf heard a voice in his ear, then felt the world spin around him as endless flames filled his vision. When Rolf returned to his senses, he found that he was no longer in the shattered house. The clear blue sky came back into view, and a gentle breeze soothed his nerves. The only similarity was that they were still standing on the Thunderbird's back, with the coffins of Mr. and Mrs. Nicola's Flamel suspended on either side.
We're out.
Rolf sat down on the bird's back, his arms and legs weak. He thought he was dead.
How did you do it, Harles?
Rolf asked curiously, turning to face him, remembering that there was no way to perform apparition in that unique space.
A respected professor once told me that when an independent space collapses, its occupants will be able to escape for a short period of time, and all protective measures will be disabled. If you can find the right moment, you will be able to escape.
Ivan said with great emotion. Rolf looked at him, speechless. He could understand how dangerous this method was just by listening to Ivan's explanation, and it would not be an exaggeration to describe it as putting one's life on the line. Any second too slow and Ivan would have been torn to shreds by the turbulence. However, who was the professor who taught them such strange knowledge? Rolf had a strange look on his face, but before he could ask any more questions, he was distracted by screams from below. He sat on the Thunderbird's back and looked down. Towering buildings came into view, and he realized that he and the others were flying over the city on the Thunderbird.
Where are we? Shouldn't we be in the forest where we entered?
Rolf asked, frowning.
We're in Paris, France. Apparently, there's also a gateway into that space.
Yvonne explained slowly, not looking very surprised. When he was studying alchemy at Nicolas Flamel's, he was able to see the streets of Paris just by opening a window.
I'm afraid we're in trouble.
Rolf said, feeling a headache coming on. They had managed to get away from Grindelwald, and now trouble was coming their way. It was no small matter to have so many muggles see signs of magic and cause a large-scale riot. In the worst-case scenario, they might even end up in prison.
My God, what kind of bird is this? It has 3 pairs of wings. Get down, get to that roof.
Chapter 915. Do you know how much trouble you've caused?
Misunderstanding, it's all a misunderstanding.
Rolf shouted as he threw his hands up in surrender. Yvonne looked at him, speechless, but didn't comment. Investigating Grindelwald would require the cooperation of the French Ministry of Magic, and it wasn't a good time to get on his bad side. Their friendliness did not have much effect, as the Aurors were clearly hostile. Bruno, the leader of the Aurors, suppressed his anger and hissed.
Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused? There are tens of thousands of muggles in this city who saw you flying on a Thunderbird. Some of them even took pictures of you and sent them to their friends and family. For this, the Ministry of Magic must send hundreds of Aurors to clean up the mess you've made.
Rolf shuddered as Bruno growled at him, but he was experienced enough to not be intimidated by Bruno's aggressive tone.
Please calm down, Captain Bruno. In fact, this situation is completely unexpected.
Bruno interrupted with a sneer. This reason was not very reliable, as he had heard reports of 2 wizards riding a Thunderbird around Paris in a very arrogant manner. As Bruno waved for the Aurors to bring them in for questioning, Ivan said,
Gellert Grindelwald.
Ivan had come up with this theory when he first saw the symbol of the Hallows in the hotel, and now that he had met Grindelwald, he was 100% sure of it. Bruno was visibly taken aback, and he swallowed the words he had been about to say. He gave them a long look, then asked them fiercely,
What exactly do you know? And where did you get this information?
Captain Bruno, it's Grindelwald's fault that we're in Paris.
Rolf said with a shrug, then proceeded to recount the events of the night before. However, when it came to their entry into the necropolis of Nicolas Flamel, Ivan took over the story, deliberately leaving out the part about him and Grindelwald fighting over the resurrection stone. Rolf could, of course, tell that Ivan was hiding something, but he wisely chose not to reveal it. Compared to the French Ministry of Magic, he was much more wary of offending this wizard, who was young but extremely powerful. However, their argument did not gain Bruno's confidence, as it sounded like a very fantastic adventure story.
You both accidentally spotted Grindelwald while you were chasing the Thunderbird, and managed to break into Nicolas Flamel's grave to fight him and escape before the place completely collapsed.
Bruno asked Ivan and Rolf, his voice full of doubt. How could these 2 boys compete with a legendary dark wizard like Grindelwald? He even suspected that Ivan and Rolf had accidentally stumbled across the spatial node near the town and sneaked in with the recently tamed Thunderbird, hoping to steal the treasure inside. This was more in line with what he had seen.
Captain Bruno, if you have any doubts about this, you might as well try it yourself.
Ivan replied coolly.
Try how?
Bruno asked, narrowing his eyes.
With a wand, of course.
Ivan sneered.
That's the general idea, Mr. Minister.
5 minutes later, inside the French Ministry of Magic, Bruno was making a weak report, rubbing his aching chest. So 14 of you Aurors couldn't even last a minute against an underage brat? The French minister glared at Bruno. It seemed the Ministry of Magic had been at peace for so long that they had forgotten how to fight. Bruno opened his mouth to protest, but he had nowhere to vent his frustration. It wasn't that they didn't train hard enough, but they were too strong. Ivan was able to easily counter all the magic they cast during the battle, and Bruno doubted that even 10 Aurors would make a difference. After giving Bruno a warning look, the French minister spoke kindly to Ivan and Rolf.
Monsieur Scamander.
There's no need for a reward. I just want to know what you're going to do with the teacher's coffin.
Ivan said noncommittally. He didn't think they would offer anything very valuable. On the contrary, the other party's kind attitude made him feel inexplicably uneasy.
Nicolas Flamel is the finest French alchemist, a legend who has lived for over 600 years, the pride of France, and his coffin should be buried in the French National Cemetery of the highest order.
Ivan nodded. It was a good arrangement. He had intended to take both coffins back to England for burial, but he thought that Nicolas Flamel would prefer to be buried in his native land. As they were talking, an Auror pushed the door open and whispered something in the French minister's ear. The minister's smile immediately disappeared and he stared at Ivan and the others, muttering to himself.
The men I sent did not find the 4 saints you mentioned in that forest. That's impossible. They don't have wands and they're injured. There's no way they could have broken free of the binding spell I put on them.
Rolf exclaimed urgently. Ivan was also surprised, but his expression remained calm as he guessed.
It seems you were too slow. Grindelwald probably saved them early.